Hey everyone, thank you for watching this edition of KGUP Presents. I'm your host, Mikey Jayy. I'm super pumped for this episode because we have the one, the only Russianvids, also known as RV Truth himself. You don't want to miss this episode, so don't go away. We'll be right back.
Won't raise a flag, and everything you know will be past tense. Need any help with your bags up? Are you checking out early again? No one this day. Your ignorance, that's not winner sense. Forget it ever happened if it has nothing to do with me. So what should I care for you? Because it's the truth. Just sipping down your fears and letting taste turn to delight.
And welcome back. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Mikey Jayy here on KGUP Presents. I know I haven't posted a video in quite a while, and it's because my schedule has been really hectic, and also don't like to interview just anyone. And I'm not much of a rambler or video editor. I pretty much only do interviews. And however, I have been working on a side project, and a lot of you will actually appreciate it because I'm actually putting together a flat Earth video. It's pretty much a recap of my journey to becoming a flat earther over the last 18 months. It's coming up on 2 years already. I don't want to give away too much because honestly, I haven't done a whole lot of production yet. I'm actually still in the research, gathering facts and scientific evidence, and that itself takes a long time. And I don't know if you're aware, but I went to college to become a journalist, and as a trained journalist, I have an issue with saying something without backing it up with facts and citations and all that jazz. I don't know how entertaining it's going to be because like I said, I'm not the best producer or video editor. I mean, I can do some basic stuff, but more importantly, I felt the need to put myself out there because I do meet a lot of people that are on the fence and do question the mainstream. And I know what it's like because there's a lot of misinformation out there. And slowly over my life, I just put things together and decided that, just realized that mainstream is just lying to us constantly. And there's a lot of censorship. And I wanted to make a video from my perspective because I'm kind of one of those people that used to believe in the globe model, believed in space, and I was also one of those people that was just doubting everything I was being told. But that's not what this episode is about. Like I said before, I don't want to just interview just anybody. I mean, I bring people on the show that I personally enjoy watching and listening to. And today's guest is no exception. He has his own show, and it's a pretty damn good one. I discovered Russianvids when he was a guest on Conspiracy Castle a few months back. And from there, I just started watching his show, and he covers so many great topics. He does a lot of interviews. He dissects the mainstream news, Hollywood, sports, political leaders, and exposes all the mistakes that NASA and SpaceX makes. You name it. You might only know him from the photo of Rowdy Roddy Piper And Roddy Piper just so happens to be my favorite WWF wrestler of all time. So without further ado, let's bring him on, the man of the hour, Mr. Russianvids himself of RV Truth. What's up, my guy?
Mikey, I appreciate the very generous introduction, and definitely you're in a very good position when you say Roddy Piper is your favorite pro wrestler, because growing up, it was obviously the same case with me. But of course, my theme is not from the Roddy Piper from the WWF. It's John Nato from They Live. But both characters I enjoyed tremendously. One for entertainment, one for truth in plain sight with the John Carpenter movie They Live.
Yeah. We definitely want to talk about that. But first, I mean, when I emailed you, I was shocked how quickly you responded that it was like the equivalent of catching a trophy fish in the first 15 minutes. Because you're so popular. I mean, you have, thousands of views and thousands of subscribers. And, I looked at all your material, and obviously your channel has been deleted. So, because it goes back even further than just 1 year. I mean, you had, videos from like 4 years ago, and you were probably deleted way back then too.
Multiple times, and more times than I probably can count, over 24. I had channels with, I had 2 channels simultaneously going, 150,000 subscribers in a year, 50 million views back in 2016. But before that, I was on YouTube going back 2008, 2009, 2010, covering a lot of topics prior to Flat Earth, which we're going to get into, of course, later. And just what I'm getting at is, unfortunately, with the whole YouTube algorithm and the way things are set, we cannot always say everything we want to say. We cannot produce video productions like we want to. Unfortunately, it's self-censorship with the way things are on YouTube. We try our best to work a way around that, and that's what I'm doing now. And actually, I'm using a different name, of course, going by Russianvids. Now I'm going by RV Truth. Different layout, different photo, different everything to beat the algorithm. And that's what I've done, and that's what I'm doing, and just being careful. I want to, keep the channel alive, and I was always just kind of like bullheaded and just kind of like, I want to speak the real truth, but speaking the real truth, you're not going to last. You got to be smart about it. You got to, kind of code things, with the words you use, and I won't mention it in detail here, but definitely there's a way around the algorithm and to keep yourself alive on YouTube.
Yeah, I've been learning like little tricks of how to say things, and if you do say them, you have to say it in a certain way where the affliction in your voice isn't giving it away. Or I don't know. I haven't figured it out yet.
Well, I'll say this, Mikey, a lot of laughing, even though serious subjects, a lot of your tone of voice, a lot of laughing, not a lot of yelling or this angry sound, and that's definitely detected in the algorithm. So whenever I mention something that I kind of veer off and get a little bit heated, I kind of end it with a laugh and kind of like a joking manner, because I'm sure the algorithm detects even those things where your tone of voice, like you said. So yeah, definitely that. And we call known events that I've covered in the past, with these schools, I call them bang bang events instead of what they really are. And these are just different terms that are used to get past the algorithm.
Right. Yeah. Those bang bang events I had been following for, ever since the Batman one. And that kind of woke me up. And, at that time, I think I was just starting to listen to Alex Jones, and he was going into full detail, and he had, his website, and he was like posting all these photos of these actors that were making it appear as if these events were real. And I just started putting two and two together, and I was just realizing how phony all these scenes were. And nobody was even looking at it. I mean, they wouldn't even consider looking at it. They would just first look at where the information was coming from. Then if it wasn't something that was like, NBC, Universal, or CNN, I mean, they wouldn't even consider it as fact.
Yeah, that's goes back to Brzezinski back in 1972, of course, deeply embedded with the U.S. government, where he talks about how soon the public, after watching last night's news, they will be unable to come to conclusions based on using their own mind. They're going to basically just repeat what is presented, and that was the ultimate goal. And of course, that's mission accomplished. That's exactly what's happening. People, in society, they work their 9-to-5 jobs. They're just trying to make ends meet. You're putting more on. You're putting loading more onto them when they come home from work after a long day. They just want to sit back, watch the news, and just absorb like a sponge what's presented. And it's just more work for them to break down, analyze things, and it's just the thought of having to question what's presented. Now you got to question everything. So if you open up one can of worms, you have to open them all up. So now you have to question everything. So that's why a lot of people shut down the notion that these are staged events. They don't want to go in that direction because, again, now they got to reevaluate their whole belief system in the media, and it's really huge because obviously there's so many different news networks. But what people need to understand is these people sitting behind the counter, I should say the desk, the news desk, not the counter. They're just reading off a script, obviously, and they're just news readers. They're not actually reporting. They're not actually going to these events and seeing it for themselves when it's initially reported. Then, of course, you might have your one or two correspondents at the actual site, and obviously these are just actors when they go there. But the bottom line is, our news is controlled. If people look at just fine details, you look at CNN, it's a Time Warner owned a company. You look at Court TV going back in time, then later on transition to True TV, even TMZ. These are all owned by Time Warner. So it's almost like Coke owning a Sprite. It's like they're supposedly competitors. They're
Right.
supposedly sovereign, but they're actually under the same umbrella. So when people look deeper, they're going to understand the whole concept of, there's a lot of different news networks, but the parent companies are just a few when you break it all down.
Right. They're all basically saying the same thing and
Yeah.
getting the same press releases. And this is what they're allowed to talk about. And you can see right through it. I mean, but you just have to be aware of what you're seeing and comparing and contrasting each network and how very alike all of their scripts are pretty much the same. I mean, there's...
Well, I'll say this, Mikey, you're hitting the nail on the head here. One thing I always explain to people, you have the conservative network, and really only one when it comes to Fox News. Everything else is liberal, as far as CNN, MSNBC, ABC, CBS. They're all on the liberal side. So they're really pushing the left, the liberal agenda. But it's like the duality. It's like the yin and the yang, where they have to have the contrast. It would be too obvious that there's obvious manipulation going on when you only have one side of the story. So, but what it comes down to is they'll debate, for example, the conservative aspect versus the liberal aspect of things when it comes to politics, but they keep people in a box. You can debate only certain things. You cannot step out of that spectrum where they allow the narrative to be discussed as far as what could be debated, what can't be debated. They're the ones that command that. They're the ones that dictate that. And if anybody steps out of those boundaries, then you're a quote conspiracy theorist. You're a nut job. And so they're definitely mind controlling society in how to think, what they can debate. So just a quick analogy. Not that I believe in aliens or UFOs, but back in the 80s, it was you're a nut job if you believed in aliens or UFOs. But then later on in the late 90s, moving forward, then you have people like Michio Kaku and other so-called scientists come out and say the possibility of extraterrestrials is it's very possible. So when people hear that, the millions upon millions of people hear that, now those people could go in that direction. So this is the mind control that's taken place at every level. But the UFO, which is the UFO aspect, which we can get to later, that's one that they're really pushing lately. But it's funny how it went from you're a nut job to now it's accepted by many people in society with all the videos released by the Pentagon supposedly, and they're definitely setting the stage. They're not going to air something, they're not going to waste precious airtime discussing things, bringing it up, unless it serves an agenda.
Right. You mentioned Edward Bernays earlier, and that was one of the key things that kind of woke me up to the deception, because he wrote a book in like 1923, and then he wrote another one in 1942 or 47, and it was about propaganda and how you can manipulate the masses by just subtle influence and subtle things, nothing too dramatic, but just gradually over time you can manipulate the masses in order to think and do things to your favor. And next thing you know, all the commercials were started to gear people to purchasing certain products, and getting them to do things that that the government couldn't just say, you need to do this, but they had to be coerced. So it appeared to be their original idea, like, oh, this is for the greater good, and I need to do this. But in order for the government to get people to do it, they needed to be manipulated and just made to believe that these are original thoughts, but they were being coerced the entire time. And I had this, years later, probably 10 years later, I invited my philosophy professor to an event, and we were talking about it, and like, yeah, your class is what woke me up to all the deception, and I started looking at things differently. And he was just like arguing with me, because at that time, Hillary was running against Trump, and I was kind of like in that whole paradigm myself, and so I was kind of like half awake, half asleep. But later on, after discovering like the whole flat earth thing, I realized I was completely asleep. But it was just this whole gear of like making you believe that there was one side was lying to you, and then the other side was the truth. But in reality, we were being lied to on both spectrums. So
yeah, absolutely. It's you're talking about politics, you're talking about a two-headed snake, and it's option right. A or B, and then they of course give us the alternative with the independent, such as Ron Paul, Ross Perot, and these types. But every single every single area you turn to, it's controlled. Right. And it's like, I look at it as like watching a movie. If you're going to watch someone in a movie, everybody that's in that movie obviously is paid to be there, and that's the same premise when it comes to politics. And they always give us hints. Through all the lies, they give us hints. Was it? I believe it was Teddy Roosevelt who said many years ago, "If it happens in politics, it's meant to happen that way." Getting back to Hillary, you mentioned Hillary and Trump and this huge debate. It's very, of course, polarizing, the left versus right, and people's emotions get attached. And of course, if you're a liberal, they're going to say things that you want to hear. If you're a conservative, obviously they're going to say things you want to hear. This is part of pulling you in, like rat poison. But what I'm getting at is people need to take a step back and just look back over time and look at all the photos of Hillary and Donald Trump together, going back to the early 80s when Trump's children, with Hillary, they're all together. Obviously people know that Trump had a wedding with Melania. The Clintons were invited. They're all together. Yeah.
Yep. I heard about that wedding.
I'm sorry?
It was in India, right?
I don't know where it's located, but I know it was back in about, I think, 2005. I could be off on the exact year, but it wasn't too long ago. But what I'm getting at, it went from Hillary and Bill Clinton attending the wedding, many photos together, to the supposed showdown, the debates on all over TV, where of course Donald Trump says, "I'm gonna, have Hillary Clinton imprisoned," and of course we all know what happened after the fact, after Trump was so-called elected, which I call selected. He's speaking at this one dinner gathering. Hillary's attending, and he goes on about how Hillary's a fantastic woman. We should give her applause. All these kind of things, and people have a very short attention span, not remembering just during the debates, just a few short months prior, how he was threatened to imprison her. So again, it just I look at society as the individual. They could be very, very intelligent sounding and very adept with what their profession is. But as far as society as a whole, they run in packs. They run, it's group thought, and they just go with consensus. And that's the reality of our society. Is people, the individual, smart, but people as a group are more or less sheep and just go with the flow. And it's due to peer pressure, of course, and the perspective of people wanting to be liked and accepted. And you can't step out of that spectrum that's being presented in the media, because if you do, now you're an outcast. Now you're a black sheep. Now you're no longer going to be accepted in society. So it's definitely mind control on society that's taking place on both sides, left and right. And definitely with the news stories, they're going to get to the emotions of people. And when you get emotional, obviously you're not using your mind. It's more a reactionary type of thing. And that's what's happening in society. So I look at, and this is to be frank, I look at many adults as just grown children when it comes to the world deception, because again, they could be they can know, for example, how to program a computer, how to, whatever their job is, they could be very, very, very well versed. But when it comes to the political aspect in the media, which is based on trust in the media, trusting what they're saying, and this is where we have to remember, just because someone, it's like the old saying, this is the best analogy I have. It's like, this is a very popular saying back in the 80s. You had a doctor who's a brain surgeon come home after, brain surgery. Then he talks to his 10-year-old child and asks him how to program the VCR, because they're not well-rounded. They know they're proficient in one area in their life. They're not well-rounded. And that's what it comes down to with many individuals.
Right. Yeah, for some reason, when we get older, we kind of step away from that creativity and that exploratory mindset. And so we can't figure out simple things like, like when we get a new cell phone, it's like, oh, the technology is so far advanced that we look at it and we're lost for, a couple of weeks before we figure out how to actually operate it. But a kid can figure out in a matter of an hour,
Yeah. It's like the best analogy I have as far as that's concerned. I'm glad you brought that up. It's like language. When children are very young, you can bring them in any environment. They can learn a language. If they're it's Japanese, Chinese, Russian, whatever it is. The mind is like clay when people are young. When you get older, try to learn a new language. Your mind's hardened. The clay is hardened up, and now it's very, very difficult to learn a new language. It can't be done, just like learning new truths. We can do that, but it's very difficult, because we've all been programmed to think a certain way, and beliefs. And if people, it's like I said, learning a new language. If you're really passionate about it, you can do it, but it's very hard after a certain point. After, I would say, about the age of 17, 18, it's very difficult. And that's also the political spectrum. Once someone affiliates themselves with the political, it doesn't matter if it's left, right, or middle, independent. Once you join that party, even in the deceptive system that we're living in, it's how many times does a liberal become a conservative, or conservative become a liberal? It just very, 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 very seldomly, rarely this happens. And that's, of course, I'm talking just based on the deceptive left-right politics. So people, it's very hard to change people's core beliefs once they're established. And this is why that one man in Germany once said, get them while they're young. That's why programming and setting people's foundation, their core beliefs, at a very early age. And that gets back to the school system. They call it the public school system, and they're really hiding. It's really the government school system when they call it the public school system, of course.
Oh, totally. I mean, I've been watching it firsthand. I mean, I've been in teaching for, I don't know, the last 5 6 years now, and I can see it firsthand, like how the brainwashing is done. I mean, we only show CNN 10, and we're always molding children's minds to think a certain way. And I just kind of like sit back, and I there's really nothing I can do about it, because the system has been changed. And it's not about information, it's about how to manipulate our youth to think a certain way, so they're easily programmable. And like history, when we teach history, so many things about nothing is taught before 1862 for some reason. And it's made me look at the mud floods and the orphan trains a whole different way, and how our children have been reprogrammed to believe history was programmed for us to only see the future, and nothing really matters beyond 1862 for some reason. And I'm talking, when I say 1862, I mean like American history. And you can get into world history, but they go back all the way to like the end of the Ice Age, and how people first evolved and spread all over from Africa to Europe, and then gradually got over all the way to South America, which I don't really believe either, which is all provided by Discovery, who's owned by Disney. So you can all you have to do is follow the money.
This is something I've covered. When the foundation is off, everything else after that's off. When the foundation's a lie, everything after that lies a lie as well. So that we'll get in the flat earth on that topic. But as far as everything you're mentioning, as far as the education, the school system, you being a teacher, as far as being a teacher, you can't deviate from the textbook. You gotta, you can have your own thoughts, but you cannot deviate too far from that. If you do, a teacher's going to find themselves out of a job if it's reported. Hey, this teacher's pushing conspiracies, in this classroom. Right. Then deviation. And the thing is, what it comes down to is, it's like, for example, of course, teachers, they're all pushing the globe nonsense. They never seen the curve of the earth with their own eyes. They can explain the so-called rotation of the ball earth. They're just like all the students. It's just generational programming over many, many, many years, and the conditioning of the minds of the masses. And again, it's very hard to step out of those boundaries when very few are aboard. It's like this. The best analogy I have as far as that's concerned, it's like attending a party with, like, say, 30 people. And if you're the only person there that's a flat earth there, and you try to bring it up, everybody's going to laugh at you. But if you bring it up and 2 people or 3 people say, hey, I've heard about that, and I find there's some truth in that, and it's interesting. When it's now you have several people in that group of 30, and now it's being proposed that this is a possibility, other people, due to, unfortunately, consensus, they're saying, hey, more and more people are talking about this. Maybe there's something legit about it. So that's why it's so important, as far as topics, getting the word out, and there's there's definitely gonna be more discussion about it. It's very hard during the inception of because we know the flat Earth society is controlled, but when there's more and more people talking about the real flat Earth truth with solid concrete evidence, what we're talking about, not just things pulled out of thin air. And again, what it comes down to is when more and more people are talking about it, when there's more and more real hardcore evidence to validate what we're discussing, it's going to bring the idea to the table, and it's going to be discussed within more and more people. There's going to be, of course, a certain percentage that are going to reject it from the outset, and that's to the bad stigma and heavy programming.
Yeah, when I first opened the show, I was talking about censorship, and whenever you can have the title of the video exactly to the letter, and as long as you mention flat Earth, it'll give you the same 36 videos of their propaganda that they want you to see first, to show you how ridiculous this whole concept is, because they show the whole disc in space. They show the dinosaur shooting a fireball, hitting the disc in space, and they show a disc in space with all the planets being round and spherical, and then a cat knocking over something off the disc, which is nothing like what real flat earthers are, what we believe in, because there is no disk in space. There's no space at all. And they don't even want to touch that because they don't want people to consider that maybe we are the center of the universe and the universe is very small.
Yeah, you just hit the nail on the head there. It's the YouTube algorithm. Before the algorithm was put in place, if I made a video on a topic, not even regarding flat Earth, one of these Bang Bang events, it was basically open game, and what it came down to is you saw everyday people, their faces presented. Now it's like more or less turning on your TV, where you're going to see the algorithm turn to. You're going to see people behind, a desk, news people. It's going to be more media types and the controlled opposition that are going to be for pages and pages and pages. So this is what I always tell people when I talk about the flat Earth. I warn them in advance. Look, all the information I'm giving about flat Earth, all the evidence, I'm going to warn you. When you walk away, you go home and you do your own research. You're going to come upon page after page after page of propaganda on YouTube and Google. Their algorithm is set. But the funny thing is, when it comes to Google itself, they have that little citation underneath flat Earth videos about how it's an ancient, belief and all this kind of stuff. But the funny thing is, Google themselves had many Earth days where they're showing the flat Earth model, and there's I would say about 8 to 10, and they're just mockery. It's just mockery where, they'll say one thing, but they'll communicate with signs and symbols, the truth in plain sight, and definitely these are flat Earth models that they depict on their Google Earth days. And again, it's just even the Google Chrome logo. If you look at it, it's literally the ice ring with the ocean in the center. So definitely they communicate. It gets back to Freemasonry, where they learn to communicate without the use of speech, and that's a huge aspect, with society, and what's is huge, which I always talk about, is symbolism, and definitely that's an aspect, and also which a phrase I coined many years ago: truth in movies, lies in the news, where they give us the yin and the yang, through a movie. For example, Star Wars, with this deep space programming from George Lucas with aliens and other planets, and all they're pushing is propaganda of space. But before the movie starts, the Lucasfilm logo is the flat Earth model with the curved dome with the sun and the moon underneath. It's just flat out mockery. So he's not telling anybody the Earth is flat. He's showing you before the movie starts that, before you watch the propaganda, we're going to put the truth of the flat Earth right in front of your face. And only those that understand signs and symbols where they put the truth are going to understand this. And it's just going to go right. The people are going to see it and not understand what's taking place. The flip side is they'll also put programming in, like soap operas. As the world turns, they'll show the spinning globe. And so there's both aspects of programming and also the Easter eggs of truth in plain sight. And we can get more of that as we continue.
Yeah, it's just like the Disney logo and how the shooting star goes over, and the castle that's in the middle of the video, which really represents the Tower of Babel penetrating through the barrier, the firmament. Yes. I mean, that is total symbolism. And when you try to point it out to people, they're like, that's you're just diving into conspiracy. And people are already programmed to already like debunk everything that you're saying, because they don't want to see the reality, like that the truth is in plain sight. They really don't want to know.
Yeah, because now what you're telling them is why they get so bent out of shape. Basically, it's because their subconscious is being attacked. The subconscious controls the conscious mind, and basically what you're telling them is you've been deceived to believe something that's a lie. So this is why a lot of people get upset. They kind of rage, because it's like, how dare you insinuate that I'm deceived? I believe in the mainstream narrative of we're living on a globe, and you're telling me I'm deceived and everybody else is deceived. How dare you? But the thing is this, in my aspect, I put many pieces together. It's not just Disney. You look at, for example, the first dome stadium in the world, the Astrodome, which basically, of course, translate to the Star Dome. where they have a glass ceiling above. They have a rainbow seats on in the upper deck that go around the whole stadium. It's based on
Oh.
It was based on astronauts, because the Houston Astrodome, before it was the Astros, the Houston Astros baseball team, they were the Colt 45s. So they were converted from the Colt 45s to the Houston Astros, and the actual uniforms were that of a rainbow. The groundskeepers, they were dressed in astronauts outfits. In the actual parking lot, they had Polaris as a symbol, as a statue outside. Everything about the Astrodome they're basically showing us the flat Earth model in plain sight, and millions upon millions of people attended events at the Astrodome, not just baseball games, the Houston Oilers football games, concerts, and people have no idea what they're looking at. But definitely the glass ceiling, the glass dome above, that's the firmament, which is mentioned in the Bible. And and the funny thing is too, when you hit a home run, they had this graphic on the big screen of the ball going through the glass ceiling, just like they showed during the episode of The Simpsons, when
Right.
Homer hits a home run and it hits the glass ceiling and the waters above come crashing down. But it's not only that, Mikey, it's more to it. That's just one example. You have the Egg Dome in Japan. You have the Sky Dome in Toronto, Canada. The Sky Dome. So they have, and you have the Sun Dome in Florida. So they're definitely putting the whole concept of the dome, the King Dome in Seattle, as we all know. They actually employ that later on. But biblically, it was called God's King Dome. The King Dome. It's basically, the etymology is the kingdom is, the kingdom is kingdom. It's just, they just changed up a little bit. But definitely It's in biblical scripture where the King Dome is mentioned. So definitely, as far as why it's so important to cover the flat Earth, it's because this is the foundation of all lies. And to those that say, flat Earth, why is it important? How about $65 million a day, NASA's budget? That's coming out of our pockets. If they don't have deep space, they don't have, they cannot, push the propaganda of we need these funds to send these probes to Mars or to distant planets when they're literally all within the firmament. So this is why it's so important, hiding the creator. And that's a huge part what they're doing is when you remove God, they make themselves gods. And that's what it comes down to, is this worldwide deception. It goes very deep. And we have to be careful when we present too much to people that are new to these concepts, because it's too much too soon, and a lot of people just run off. They run away because their minds just explode because there's too much information too soon.
Well, I've noticed that more and more people today have grown up not ever setting foot in a church. And I'm not saying that church is the correct way of learning about the truth, because a lot of religions are all just kind of controlled opposition.
Yes. Absolutely. I'll just touch upon that. And it gets back to you as an educator, as a teacher, Mikey. You can't deviate from the textbooks, but the church, they do. The flat Earth is in Genesis, where the stars, the moon and sun are mentioned, but no planets. Planets are just wandering stars. They're a different kind of star. So, I mean, the flat Earth truth is in there. There's so much truth in there that's not mentioned in the churches. So they completely deviate from the Bible. That's why myself, I don't attend church. Like you just said, it's like this. They control science. They control the churches. They control everything mainstream. There's a lot of truth in the Bible, but people have to have good discernment and figure it out. You're not gonna get the truth from a televangelist, the biblical truth from a televangelist on TV, or even, I hate to say, even if you attend church. If someone attends church, just like you attend school, you have to use a good filter and take what's good and leave the rest. And it's very hard, because a lot of people, they have this kind of outset of, well, these people that are on TV, they're on there because they're highly educated, they're smart, so I better just sit back and listen to them. And when I attend church, I'm there to learn. Well, they're not taught to question. Just like when people read a textbook, if it's written in a textbook, it's not to be questioned. You cannot question. For example, as a teacher and a student, if they have a debate, they always refer to the textbook as it's the truth, and it's not to be debated. And this is the problem. If it's written in paper, it's like written in stone, and this is factual. But we all know science throughout the years is ever changing. Even science admits that from the distance of the sun, first calculated at supposedly 10 million miles away. It went to 34. It went to 75. Now it's at 92. So what is it? And if science is truth, when it was 10 million miles away, that was truth at the time. Quote, truth. So, this is why people need to understand when it comes to science. That gets back to a scientist from the University of Maryland, Professor Sylvester Gates, who said, people don't know what science is. It's not about truth. All we can do is come up with theories. And he says, he goes back to Einstein, where he says, I'm not sure if there's any truth in science, specifically when it comes to the distance of the sun, what the sun is made of. These are all theories. That's why they call it the theory of evolution, the string theory, the theory of gravity, the theory of relativity, all these things. Just getting back. I'll let you continue. I'm sorry, I keep going on and on. But
no, I don't
simple
mind.
things, most simple things. If you ask someone the basic foundational things of why the Earth is spinning, why there's inertia, they're not even going to know. But they're so offended if you mention the globe. They don't know it's because of the initial Big Bang. That initial Big Bang explosion, this rock in space, which created the so-called inertia that's still existing from a billion years ago. But one thing I'll mention, and I'll let you continue with the questioning, is I need to mention this. It's so huge to anybody that's new to the whole flat Earth. Basically, according to science, their evidence, their proof that the so-called ball of Earth is spinning. Again, getting back to inertia, is the Foucault's pendulum, which we all see in museums, where they have the apparatus swinging from the floor of a museum, the pendulum swinging back and forth, and this is supposedly proof, evidence that the ball Earth is spinning. First off, it needs to be pushed. Secondly, they're using magnets, and if this is their proof that the ball Earth is spinning, then why doesn't a chandelier on your ceiling swing back and forth? Why doesn't a wrecking ball, when it's stationary, not at use, why isn't that ball swinging back and forth? So the Foucault pendulum is swinging back and forth, proving the supposed spin of the Earth. But again, it's just a bunch of smoke and mirrors. The bottom line is, water always seeks its level, and we can see too far. Everything after that keeps people away from the truth of the flat Earth, there's lies stacked upon lies stacked upon lies, and there's they're always asking questions because there's a lot of, they put a lot of stumbling blocks. But just know the foundation of water being level, we can see too far, and just know after that it's lie after lie after lie. We can get into that, but I'm going on a bit long here.
Oh, that's all right. In 2014, I was in teaching 8th grade, and we showed a video by Vsauce, and it showed the model of the sun and how the planets are just spinning in this continuous circle and flying through infinite space. And they were talking about the calculations of how fast we were going, and how the sun, how the Earth is spinning around the sun at 66,000 miles, and how all the planets are in synchronous speeds of 500,000 miles, and the entire galaxy or the solar system is flying through infinite space at 1.3 million miles an hour. And I'm showing this video as he's saying this, and I'm like, this makes no logical sense. When have we empirically have tested this theory, and how do we know for sure? And have we observed this? We don't have any evidence from any satellite out in space that could show that we're actually flying at these speeds. And yet we're supposed to believe this as fact. And all the students are just like, in grip of watching this video, like, wow, and I remember being at that age and just being fascinated with it all, and and watching all these movies and reading books and all this fantasy is just, it's putting everything into concrete place that this is reality. Why would we have science fiction if part of it wasn't true?
Yeah, and that, you just hit the nail on the head where it can't be proven scientifically. It's just It's people will repeat these things as fact, but they can't. There's no evidence, and that gets back to supposedly the reason we don't sense or feel is because the theory of relativity, where everything is perfectly in sync, where we're basically, we could be we could be in Australia, doing a high wire act, and or we could stack, like they do in like San Francisco, in the one of these parks where they stack these stones perfectly aligned, where they're stacked up, 8-10 feet, and they're just standing there perfectly. While again, you just mentioned the galaxy is supposedly moving at 1.3 million miles an hour, and this rotation and this the rotation around the sun itself. So all these things, and these are implanted in the minds of society. And again, once I look at people, another analogy I have is I look at people's minds like a CD-ROM. Their CD-ROMs, once they're imprinted, they cannot be rewritten. They can't be written over. Our minds have to be like a rewritable CD, where with new information we can write over it and keep the mind flexible. That's why I always tell people, once you think you know it all, that's when you stop learning and question all things that can be proven to you, and not always just say, just point to a scientist on TV as evidence of anything. I was like, if that scientist can't prove these things scientifically, then it's pseudoscience. It's no longer science. People say, but we see images, we see supposed video from space. Well, that's not based on science. I can show you a video of the Loch Ness Monster, in Scotland. I can show you, aliens from the planet Draconia in these fuzzy images. That's not evidence of anything. That's not scientific evidence. So what it comes down to is, again, there's many holes in the whole, heliocentric model. Major holes, such as where you have the heliocentric model with the sun, then you have Mercury and Venus, then the so-called ball Earth. The problem is this: you have Mercury and Venus between the sun and Earth. The problem is we see Venus and Mercury at times at night, and that means they have to somehow be on the other side of the ball Earth, opposite of the sun, and be where Jupiter is, where Saturn is, to have this happen. It's literally impossible to see these two so-called planets at night with the heliocentric model. It makes perfect sense with the flat Earth model as the stars, and the planets are wandering stars as they rotate above. It gets back to, again, I say truth in movies, lies in the news. Well, truth in music as well. There's this one band from San Francisco called Journey, and they have that one song, the wheel in the sky keeps on turning. And that's basically the sun, moon, the stars. The sun and the moon are like the two hands on a clock. And people don't realize that when you look at a wristwatch, that's literally the flat Earth model, where the so-called North Pole, that's the centerpiece of the clock, is basically dictating how the sun and the moon circle above. And of course, they lap over each other, which causes eclipses. But other contradictions when it comes to the whole globe. For example, when you have planes flying on this spinning globe. So, for example, they say the Earth is rotating 1,100 miles an hour at the equator, but as you move, for example, up north in Florida, it's about 900. In New York, it's about 500. So, how do the pilots, as they fly north and south, how do they compensate for the different speeds, the different speeds of the Earth as they go up north or come down south? And here's a huge thing: if you're flying, say for example, from New York and you want to land in Jacksonville, Florida, with a north-south runway, how do you a plane going 500 miles an hour with the ball Earth spinning 900 miles an hour? How does the plane compensate for the spin of the Earth? And what the globe heads will say is, well, the plane is, it's moving along with the atmosphere. But here's the problem. This is the problem. The huge problem with science is contradictory with the Coriolis effect. So they say, science says when birds, for example, they go south for example, for the winter when it gets cold in say North America, they have to compensate for the spin of the Earth as they fly south. Say to go to Mexico, South America for the winter. So there's the Coriolis effect. The spin of the Earth affects the birds, but it doesn't affect the planes. Same with people in the military. They say we have to compensate for the spin of the Earth, but planes don't. When they shoot rockets or they sniper fires is I gotta be careful. The sniper, I should say he fires. I won't say the other word. They have to compensate for the rotation, but the plane doesn't. The birds do, but the plane doesn't. So there's many contradictions within science. If people look deep enough and research it enough, they're going to find things. People need to keep an open mind and just there should be no. People should not have a side. People just should look at all the evidence and come to the conclusion based on what's presented. And that's what I did many, many years ago.
Yeah, my introduction, I was talking about how I was going to make a video, a flat Earth video, to kind of prove all these facts. I mean, there's plenty of flat Earth videos out there, but a lot of them are so hidden that the regular person couldn't find them. But if you're subscribed to my channel, you'll be able to watch it. And a lot of people ask the same questions. How does the sun, light up the certain, the same side of the Earth, and how is it not covering the entire Earth if it's over and close to the Earth? And those are some of the things that I'm going to try to answer, because there's a lot of people that have answered those questions, and that's just kind of basic stuff.
Yeah, that's a good question. Here's the thing is, I don't mind these questions because we cannot just like, this is something we've answered many times. When we're involved with flat Earth, we're going to be patient and explain these things in detail so people new to it will understand. There's no way around that, of course. Right. Educating people on this. If you look at the sun with your own eyes carefully, say on a cloudy day, you can literally see that the sun is just above the clouds, literally just above the clouds. And just look at the moon. I'm going to get on topic as far as the illumination of why does the sun illuminate the whole flat Earth, and that's due to of course a very local sun. So again, when it comes to science is based on duality, just like Freemasonry, which basically controls science. If they tell us the sun is very large and far away, it's the duality aspect. It's relatively small and close. So people can dispute or have an argument. Well, I think the sun is 92 million miles away. No, I think it's 75 million. You cannot go in the direction. It's literally just 1,000 miles away. That's why they teach on the extremes, because the human mind, the psychology of the human mind, it can't go from A to Z. Once you're taught one extreme, that's why they teach on extremes. And definitely biblically, for example, the Bible says how the earth is fixed, it's stationary, does not move. And of course, science being the opposite, it's going to say we're stationary and flat. So everything's in the exact opposite spectrum. And again, it's too far for the human mind to go once you're taught one thing. And the bottom line is, here's something that people need to consider. We're talking about the sun here, but we should also bring the moon into the equation, because there's many times, obviously, we can see the sun and the moon in the sky at the same time. And so what is the other side of the ball Earth getting as far as sunlight or moonlight, when we could obviously see both? That just tells you that we live on a flat plane with the sun and the moon circling above. And this is something that people see constantly during the day. You see that daylight moon, the daytime moon. And if that so-called moon that's not 283,000 miles away, they say it fluctuates. The distance fluctuates slightly, but whatever the case may be, how do we see that distant moon within our atmosphere, in the so-called atmosphere? I'll just say the word atmosphere, within our sky during the day? If it's in deep space during the day, that doesn't make sense. We shouldn't see it at all. Like I said, we see the sun and the moon in the sky at the same time. And this is going to get a bit deeper, but like science, again, the lies of science saying the reason the moon illuminates at night is because it's reflecting sunlight, and when in reality, I believe the sun and the moon work together as one, and the moon is basically being charged. The sun and the moon definitely work together, electromagnetism, creating the tides, but what I'm getting at is the lies of science stating how the moon's getting a reflection. If that was the case, we would see this beam of light through the sky, and they make all the excuse in the world, but basically, if people study the moon at night, you're going to see the clouds in proximity illuminated, and that tells you right there it's giving off its own light. But again, when it gives off its own light, I believe it's because it's due to the charge, not the reflection, the charge from the sun. It's just like those stones we all seen where you put a flashlight next to it, or you put it in light for a good amount of time, then you turn off the light and it glows, something to that nature, something to that effect.
Cami Nodal did a pretty awesome experiment with, I think she was using phosphorus as a charging mechanism to demonstrate how stars absorb the sun's rays, and so that's why they illuminate at night, and why they go away during the daytime, because they lose its charge, but then it's recharged as the sun circles back around.
Yes.
And she created a model, like a real life model, and was able to what's that called? She was able to demonstrate how it works in real life. And I thought it was like really fascinating. I was like, oh my God, I mean, that explains so much why we see the stars, and why even astronauts have claimed when they're above 80,000 feet that they can no longer see stars, and it's completely black.
Yeah,
and
that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And I'm sorry to interrupt you. I was going to say, you're on point, because why do we see, sunlight? If the sun's in deep space, why do we see, light in the sky? But when they supposedly go into space from that perspective, the sky's completely dark. It should be completely illuminated, just like we are on Earth, and it's not. So these are key things proving this is a local sun.
Right. Yeah. I don't know if you saw my video with David Weiss, but I had talked about how I met a aeronautical engineer from JPL. He told me that the sun is actually closer, probably 3,000 miles. He hadn't witnessed how close it is, and if there has been studies, then he's not been aware of it. But he knows for sure that the sun isn't 93 million miles away. And he also stated that this whole global warming thing doesn't exist. It's just a cyclical thing of nature, and how everything just kind of repeats at certain times.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
And that all of it's political, and they just use it to get people to be divided, and it's a way of manipulating the masses into putting money into something that it isn't really real. So
that's spot on what this gentleman stated. I've said it many times. For example, many years ago in California, there was a so-called drought, and my neighbors all panicking. You're using a lot of water. We have a drought, and California's running out of water. I said, listen, man. As always, seasons run in cycles. There's going to be periods of a lot of rain. There's going to be periods of no rain. This is how it works throughout history. And then sure enough, the next year we had so much water, so much rain, and he felt really dumb because he was so sure, because this was being pushed by science, that California's running out of water. And now California has too much water, and a lot of flooding. But getting back to the scientists telling you about global warming being a hoax. And this is one thing I've coined as well over the years, making many fire videos. I tell them not only is global warming a hoax, the globe's a hoax. That's how far the lies go. And this is how deep it goes. And it's funny because, again, they always give us truth in plain sight. They love to mock and about the truth. John Kerry, during this one conference regarding global warming, so-called global warming. He goes, there's people that will make you believe, that there's no global warming and we live on a flat Earth, and water will just go over the side. They bring it, and Obama, as we know, has mentioned the flat Earth about 7-8 times during different speeches, and but always, here's the problem: he's always bringing up the flat Earth society. So, obviously, flat Earth society, controlled opposition, claiming we're a disc in space. Gravity's basically the reason for gravity is we're a disk moving up at space at a certain speed, and this is why we have gravity, which is obviously disinformation. So again, it's just like we talked about earlier, where they control science, they control religion, they're controlling the globe model, they're controlling the flat Earth model on the mainstream levels. So people, it's very difficult because people are sheep and they're always looking for leaders, and people need to have a mind of their own. It's simple as this: listen to everybody, but come to your own conclusions based on what can be proven to you, and that's foundational for me. I do not deal with things that I cannot prove, but it's okay if someone has beliefs. Because for example, people argue beliefs, what they believe. It's like arguing if food tastes good or not. That's a subjective determination. You cannot argue if this slice of pizza is good or not. That's again, that's just a matter of opinion. It's subjective. So, but something that's not subjective is water its level. Here's something funny. I've covered it recently, where this one man on YouTube was giving a demonstration how to make a long distance level using a hose, and at each end of the hose have these transparent type of jars or bottles where it leads to where you can see the actual level. He goes, this is how you do it. You have these hoses, like say, going underground, and you have them pop out the other end, and you can literally, when you see where the water the levels meet, this is when you have a level surface. It's because water seeks its level 100% of the time, and this is 100% accurate. So he's saying this not knowing the implications of the flat Earth and the globe versus globe Earth when he says it. So if you confront the same individual, he's gonna be like stuck in this position, like, I just said this, but the ramifications is this means the Earth is flat. Yeah. So definitely the whole, again, water needs containment to find its level. That's another issue as well. So yeah, again, the bad stigma and the consensus on one side is keeping people away from this truth. But again, it all comes down to it's not who's saying it, it's what could be proven. That's what it all comes down to me.
Yeah, I was just thinking that the guy would have an argument like, oh, that's not the same thing. But in fact, water always finds its level no matter where it is. I mean, there might be some kind of like force. I think there's, positive and negative attraction, and that's why there's tides and why it's different at night when the moon's over the plane versus the sun, because they have different magnetisms and there's different attractions. So that's why there's high tides and when
salt water is highly conductive. It's with the people have done experience. This is something provable where you lose electromagnetism, and you can basically move things due to the saltwater's conductivity. That's why there's no tides in the Great Lakes. But basically this proves the Creator created this. That's why He created the saltwater oceans with the tides. So yeah, everything can be explained. But here's a big thing, Mike, I want to mention about flat Earth, because researching this for many years, it's very important to know the ins and outs if we're going to have a discussion with someone regarding this quote debate. I don't like to have a debate discussion of flat Earth versus a globe. The scientific explanation, people, of course, standing upside down, their explanation is there is no up and down in space. There is no up and down. So wherever you are, that's basically up. Well, if you're in the ISS, if you're looking down, there's no up or down. Also, a huge thing is if you're on the so-called globe, why do we see things coming down. In space, if there's no up or down, we should see a shooting stars going in every which direction. We don't. Everything's coming down because we're living on a plane. So everything can be easily explained, but people need to armor themselves with the information. And that's very important, where I'm hitting on key things, because the reason I'm going that direction is I know these things will be mentioned for people out there listening to this podcast that are on the fence, and these topics are brought up. These are the key ones that are brought up, and they're answers for everything. It's just, again, there's a lot of stumbling blocks beyond water being level and we can see too far. They're going to mention eclipses. Well, there's many times they mention the lunar eclipse. People say, well, explain that. Well, there's many times where we see the top portion of the moon darken during a lunar eclipse. How can that be explained on the globe model? It cannot be explained. So again, there's many holes. There's some things that cannot be answered as far as shadows and exactly what is creating that upper part eclipse of the moon. But we have to always go back to what's on the ground. People will look at Aristotle as, well, Aristotle proved that we lived in a globe by sticking these, putting these sticks in the ground at different distances, and one directly under the sun, there's no shadow. One at a distance has a shadow. Well, I could be in my kitchen, standing underneath, the light, and there's no shadow, and I can have a stick in the ground in my kitchen, 10 feet away, and there's a shadow. Does that mean my floor is curved? Does it mean there's curvature to my floor? No, you get a level and it's level. So we have to always stick to the ground we're standing on, because a huge aspect is people are looking at opticals. They're looking at the horizon. Well, the horizon is an illusion itself, because it can change based on atmospheric conditions. There was this one man, Joshua Nowicki, in Michigan, looking over at Lake Michigan at the Chicago skyline, and he was showing the Chicago skyline over 30 miles, and due to the so-called curvature, we should not see that. There's a weatherman that tried to explain it away, saying, "Oh, it was a mirage you're looking at. That's why, you saw the buildings." But the problem is the mirage is a mirror reflection. It's a mirror. We should have saw the buildings being inverted. That's the mirage. That's where you get the effect. We didn't get that. All we saw were the buildings pointing straight up. What I'm getting at is what a lot of people miss is what he said. Joshua Nowicki's at the lake. He says basically, at stretches almost every day. And he goes, every time I come out here, the conditions are different. Sometimes I can see the building, sometimes I can't. That's telling you the horizon is changing, again, based on atmospheric conditions and the lensing effect and summer, winter. But what it comes down to is we should really stick to the ground we're standing on. And a lot of people in science, they want to obfuscate. They want to turn it to shadows, what's in the sky. Like anybody should know, if you have a carpenter over your house and he's going to do work on your carpet, your flooring, he's not going to look up to determine if your floor is level. He's going to be focusing on the ground. That's what we should do. And a lot of people debating this will turn it into look up at the sky, look up at the shadows, when light can bend and distort things. So we always have to remember that. We have to stick with what's underneath our feet.
Right. One of the arguments that I've often have is about sunsets and how it looks as if the sun is going down, and that the sun is being cut in half because it's dropping over the horizon. When in fact, if you have a sun filter on your telescope or your camera, you can actually see the sun going further and further out, and it's getting smaller. It's just the illumination of the sun looks like it's being cut, but it's just being cut off from the projection of the light. So it only appears to the naked eye as if it's going downward, but in fact it's going further and further out. And the thickness of the atmosphere, because there is water molecules in the atmosphere, and it's thicker as you go down towards the surface of the earth, and that makes the sun just kind of disappear. But
yes, the gradient.
Don't know.
Yeah, just like in the ocean, the gradient. There's a gradient in the atmosphere itself as well. Yeah, definitely great point. you mentioned there, Mikey. And actually, I don't know if I don't recall if David Wise showed you that clip, but I have a clip of these people out at sea, and they're zooming in with the P900 at the sun. And it's basically, like you said, it's at the horizon. You only see half the sun, and they zoom in, and it comes in full view. So that just tells you it's not actually physically around. And see, the thing is this: you show this clip, you show objective proof. There's no way you can magically make this sun reappear by zooming in if it's around a ball. But the thing is, you can show someone objective proof, but the programming is so strong, they'll just deny the evidence. And this is what's happening. But the bottom line is, yeah, everything can be explained for the most part when it comes. There's so much evidence pointing to flat Earth, and there's really none when it comes down to it, pointing at a globe of us literally coming. Supposedly, if you really break it down, we're supposedly monkeys living on a spinning ball, if you believe in evolution, zipping through space with no meaning, no rhyme, no reason. And it's just absolutely ridiculous. And you have the psychopaths behind the scenes laughing their butts off at how down society is. And I hate to say this, but the reality is they don't have respect for the people that they roll over. They look at them as a bunch of dumb sheeple that are easily manipulated. And people like us that question things, we might not know it all, but we know we're being lied to in a grand scale. And that's the reality, and that's just being honest. We don't know every little detail about this world, but we know we're being lied to in a grand scale. We know we're not living in this water rocket ball zipping through space. You go outside, you just wake up in the morning, you go outside, you get a breath of fresh air, and to believe we're zipping at space, like you mentioned, all the tremendous speeds we're moving at, we don't sense it, we don't feel it, because it does not happen. That's simple.
Yeah, there was a video that I had my wife watch the beginning of last year, and it was by the Pillar of Truth, and it was called World Upside Down. And it kind of, it talked in a very biblical sense, and like why the deception of all the things that are written in the Bible that were just kind of glossed over and forgotten about. But it talks about a lot of things that we just take things for granted. And the biggest truth was at the very end. And it was just, why would they even lie to us about this? And it was really to hide the existence of God. Yes. And that, and that's the main reason, is just to make us think that we live in this godless world and we're just a speck of dust in this infinite universe of all these, millions of galaxies in space. And, if we think that we're just this little speck of dust, and, the universe is expansive and all expanding, then we really are nothing. And we only have this like one life once, and God couldn't possibly exist and allow all this suffering and all this stuff.
Yeah. And that's the big thing is you talk to these people that, they talk about endless space. Well, how do they know there's endless space? Have they ever been to the end of the space? So how do they know it's endless? How do they know? So all these presumptions with people in society, but you just nailed it on the head there. They're trying to hide God. Again, like I said earlier, they want to make themselves gods when they remove gods, and they're going to be the authority of the minds. And that's what the word government means. It's, govern, government is basically, when you break it down Latin, it's mind control. And that's exactly what's happening. And this is what I tell people. Two things I tell people that believe in the Bible and they believe we live on a globe. I would ask them, what would be the reason for all these distant planets and stars in relation to us? Why would God have all these things in this endless space and, supposedly other living beings and other so-called planets? And a huge thing as far as biblically is the Tower of Babel, when they literally built the Tower of Babel to reach the heavens. So they don't have an answer. They don't have a response for that. So basically, the people that run this world, they replaced God's firmament above with empty space. Like God doesn't exist. Well, it's just emptiness where there's heaven. So that's literally what they have done with heaven above. It's not there. It's just emptiness. And what I find interesting too is when you reflect back, and a lot of truth in movies, when you watch the movie back in the 80s with the actor Martin Short, it was called Inner Space. And that's what we have. It's all we have is inner space. Movies like Total Recall, where
Great movie.
you have them go to Mars and they live under domes, and that's exactly what Elon Musk is doing. He's proposing these domed environments on Mars, exactly like the movie Total Recall, and that's what it comes down to is these movies. There's Star Wars, Star Trek, Total Recall, all the endless sci-fi movies. What society doesn't understand is everything you're seeing as far as movies are concerned, it's programming wrapped around as entertainment, and they don't realize this. While they're sitting back in a dark theater looking at a screen, they think it's just entertainment. They don't realize it's subconscious programming, and this apparatus and this environment around us, from movies to TV shows to the news to the science books, the environment, the apparatus that's created around us is so it goes so deep with the programming, and it gets back to a very famous man that's been in the White House for different administrations, Henry Kissinger, and what he's in this famous quote, he said, "Truth does not matter. It's what's perceived to be truth that matters."
Right.
And that's exactly what they constructed. And it gets back to Elon Musk. What I find hilarious is, of course, the godfather or grandfather, I should say, of NASA, Werner von Braun, besides his tombstone with the Bible verse, Psalms, was it 119, regarding God's firmament, it's showing his handiwork. In his book, Project Mars, is presented as the exploration of Mars, of course, and the man that leads the expedition is a man named Elon. So from fiction becomes reality, and they've done this many, many times with books like the Futility of the Titan, becoming this supposed real life event with the Titanic. We know JFK and Abraham Lincoln. They're mirror reflections upon themselves with so many things. The dates, one's 1860, one's elected in 1860, one's 1960. They had the same secretary name. One was Kennedy, the other one's Lincoln, vice versa. It's just everything adds up to this. These are both scripted events, and people can't go there when it comes to JFK, because people are always looking for heroes. But I always mention this to people. When you look at JFK, and he has that speech supposedly going against secret societies, but all you see him doing is giving Masonic handshakes to fellow politicians, to other world leaders, religious leaders like Billy Graham. But a big thing is that Zapruder film. Zapruder was a Freemason, and the film was not released until 10 years, supposedly after the fact. So it takes 10 years to release that footage. It was 10 years of at that time they didn't have the best technology. 10 years of editing for that show, creating a martyr, creating a so-called hero. And it gets back to where I believe when the people need heroes, they'll create ones for them. Right. And that's to keep people pacified in the political scheme of things. Instead of the people uprising, the 99% uprising against the 1%, they're always going to pacify society, giving people false heroes, giving people false hope, and they don't know that they're controlled. So every 4 years, we're pacified from an uprising, because so-and-so's might be in power in 4 years, and he's going to make change. And so they have these people that run this world, they're of course highly intelligent. They have the world deceived,
right,
on every angle,
and they know how to do it. I mean, I was a part of that whole Occupy movement, and I was so disappointed and upset that these protests that we were doing were starting to go away, because Obama had created this coalition, or what do you want to call it. He appointed these people to go around from city to city on how to disband all these protests. But really all they had to do was just take it off the media and just stop talking about it. And then what they did is they They made it seem like everybody had no idea what they were doing. They were just out there, just like, oh no, we're just out here together, and we're just fighting for the fight. And they made it look like there was no direction, but were all against the bad decision on the 2008, 2009 hearings, that nothing came of it. That no CEOs were reprimanded. Nobody went to jail except for that one person who turned himself in, who was just a kind of a fall guy, where they probably just made that story up completely. And the guy probably did not even exist at all. And so really nobody was penalized for the millions of all the millions of people who lost their homes, and the countries that lost all of their funding, and how it dwindled their economies, and nobody paid for anything. And so it just quietly went away, and nothing happened at all. It was almost by design.
Yeah, it is by design. Definitely, these all world events that make it on the world stage are meant to happen this way, keeping people, keeping the world unstable. That's the whole function of the CIA. And that's actually mentioned by John R. Stockwell. He mentioned this in one of his books. The function of the CIA is to keep the world unstable, to propagandize it, and teach the American people to hate and fear. When you're in the constant of hate or fear, you're not looking at the truth of things. You're like in survival mode. When you're trying to pay your mortgage, trying to just make ends meet, you don't have time to look at things and what's really happening. So, the system is not broken. It was built this way. And that's right. One thing I really want to emphasize is, as far as moving forward, there's going to be no change for, as far as, it doesn't matter who's elected, their agenda is going to be accomplished. And the only real change will come if the people overthrow those in power. And the problem with that is, even when you do that, there will be, say, for example, a new government, and there's always going to be infiltration over time, and corruption happens with people in power that, for example, they remove this world government system, and just the nature of people, absolute power absolutely corrupts. Mm-hmm. And this is a major problem with people in general. So it's even, I hate to even say that, but that's the reality of the world we're living in. And people with good intentions, they get involved with politics in the beginning, seemingly to help people, but they realize, hey, I'm not going to get very far unless I'm a yes man, and I go along with the program. So the people that get the highest up, they're the cutthroats, they're the ones that just go along with the lies and whatever they need to do to get up there. And ruthless aggression will get you high. And if you're legit, you're caring, and you really want change, you're not going to get far at all.
Right. So what got you interested and drew you into the realm of conspiracies in the first place? What do you recall what your first red pill moment was?
Well, yeah, I'm glad, Mike. I'm glad you asked that. And I gotta get back to the psychology of people itself, because this is a major factor. I truly believe, all of us are born with certain traits. We all have, it's not like I'm trying to present myself as some greater than anybody else. I'm just a regular person, but I was born with these traits of I had no interest. For example, growing up, I wasn't out there desperately seeking to make friends. It just, I let it happen when it happened. I had no problems making friends, but I wasn't desperate to make friends. If I didn't have friends, it was fine. So this gets to the very important foundation of seeking truth and looking at things objectively. When you're not pressured by your peers, when you have peer pressure, it's obvious it's going to manipulate your thoughts and in what direction you go and how to think. So I never had that. I was never concerned. So, for example, there's a latest as going, say, for example, middle school, Spuds MacKenzie was the big thing, and everybody's wearing the Spuds MacKenzie shirts. I wouldn't do it. I said, all you people are sheep. I said, and I kind of joke with them, and I'll just say it's kind of adolescent talking here. I said, if the big fat was wearing a pair of underwear over your head the next day in school, if that was the big fat, every one of you would do it. You're just going to follow whatever. And I said that, as an 11-year-old, 12-year-old in middle school, I said that to students when they're all wearing the Spuds MacKenzie shirts. I'm not going to wear one of those shirts. But even going before that, when I was about 4 or 5 years old, my brothers and I were playing outside in the front of the house, and one of my brothers said, "Hey, you know the Earth is spinning." I looked up at the sky. Says, "No, we're not. We're not spinning." He goes, "Yeah, yes, we are." He's about 3 years old, 3 years older than me. Because guess what? It's just moving so slow. You don't notice. You don't see it. I said, "No, we're not spinning. We're not moving." Later on, my high school, it was a junior high or high school. I remember being in a library and just looking at a globe with a friend, and just looking at the globe and looking at the water areas. I'm like, all the water sticking the side of this globe, and this is the world. I said, it's absolutely insane how water can stick to a ball. And I looked at the globe at the flat Earth model. I said, yeah, but water fall over the sides, because that's one thing they always excluded, was there was a barrier holding the water. It's always this, the boats going over the sides. They never included the 360 ice wall into the equation. They always removed that. So you're stuck in like, okay, is it a ball or is it flat? Well, I guess by default it has to be a globe. But I was not fully invested. I was like, I always thought of water sticking to a ball as absurd. But what people have to realize is people that say, oh, but water will fall off the flat Earth. Well, when you're in a globe, water definitely is going around the side. It's not an edge, around the side and the whole out of the bottom. So that's even more ridiculous, than the whole flat Earth thing. I look at it this way: you look at a cube, you look at a ball. If someone said we were shaped like a cube and you show this cube in space, they'll say that's absolutely ridiculous. But all you do is trim the sides around the cube a little bit, you have a ball. It's not much that different. So to tell them, hey, this water sticking in the bottom of this cube, oh, you're crazy. What are you talking about? Water sticking in the side of the cube. Oh, but when it's a ball with the heavy indoctrination. But when it comes down to this, Mikey, I'll say this. At 5 years old, we're in a classroom. We asked the teacher, how does water stick to the ball? Of course, it tells us gravity. And this is what it comes down to. At that point in time, the majority of society never revisits that. In first grade, second grade, there's not a group of third graders saying, hey, do you think they're telling us the truth or lying about this? So what I'm getting at is these kindergartners, they don't question that. They grow up to be adults that don't question it either. So It's the same frame of mind. It's embedded in you that you just go along with the program. And it gets back to, again, get them while they're young. And once someone's programmed, it's like I said, that CD-ROM is not rewritable in most occasions, unless someone has the passion. Like I said earlier, like learning a new language. If you have the passion, it can be done. It's difficult, but it can be done. Tremendous amount of hours, tremendous amount of resistance from friends, family, colleagues. I know, Mikey, along the line, you lost friends, family, unfortunately, but I say, screw it, truth over everything, and that's how I see it, because how is it, how could anybody, be okay with being born in this world and leaving from birth to death, believing you're a monkey living on a spinning ball, and you die, your whole life is a lie. Your whole life was a lie. What a pathetic existence. That's how I kind of look at it. And that's why I'm so, passionate about truth. I don't like being lied to. I don't like being manipulated. I don't like being played for a fool. And here's the thing is, again, we always have to stick with what could be proven and come to new conclusions, and not let consensus rule our minds, let what could be proven to us. And so people want to bring up science. I have nothing against science, as long as it can be proven to me in real life, not with a blackboard or whiteboard in a school. Prove it to me in reality, not in a math equation. Prove it to me in the real world. And some people, these globalists, will say, "Well, math is reality." I'm like, no, if it doesn't match our real world, it's not. It's not reality. I can make any kind of equation work. To supposedly work to make us believe we live on a concave Earth. It's like this. I was on this one podcast, this one live stream with a guy that believed we live on concave Earth. I said, prove it to me in the real world. He goes, well, I can't do that, but I can do it on paper. I said, well, if you can't do it in the real world, what you show me on paper is meaningless. And he just couldn't say anything. It was just, it was that easy. It was that
Right.
easy just to just end the so-called discussion on the concave Earth. So yeah, it's I always tell people you have to armor yourself with knowledge. They all say knowledge is power. It's absolutely true. And I like what we talked about before we went live is what it comes down to is we got to have things concrete to back up what we say. A lot of people in the conspiracy realm, specifically years ago, there's a lot of talk about like, oh, they're cloning celebrities. They have these cloning factories. I'm like, well, where's the evidence of that? Where are these cloning factories located? So they're cloning Eminem. They're cloning Dr. Dre. Where's your evidence? Oh, we know they have technology. But I say, where's your evidence? But they have cloning factories. Where are they? So I stay away from that realm. I stay away from things like that are just a fantasy, because in a lot of cases, the fantasy is better than reality. That's why it fascinates people. That's why people get involved. They get caught up with the nonsense. Stick with
Yeah.
the things we can prove to us. Yeah.
That's what makes the conspiracy theorists look crazy is getting into stuff that we can't prove.
Yeah.
And we supposedly have witnesses that have been to these cloning centers, but I can't look outside my door and out my window and see that there's clones out there. I mean there is clues that maybe there is, but I don't know for sure. I can't prove it.
Well, Mikey, I'll say this, and I need to clarify this. I'm not saying cloning at the age of infants cloning. No. And that's my fault. I should have clarified. I'm talking about celebrity cloning, where they grab Eminem, right. They can grab, an adult that's say 35, 40 years old, and bring them to some cloning factory and press them out. And the reality is they just get lookalikes. Like Madonna, it's funny, they kind of like out themselves. Madonna even mentioned, oh yeah, for security reasons, I have. It's funny. I call them doubles. There's three of them. She goes, I have three doubles, and I'm I tell people I'm going to be here, but I'm actually here, and people think I'm there when I'm actually not there. So what I'm getting at is there's no debate about cloning, like dogs from birth, with DNA and all that stuff, mixing DNA, all that stuff. But as far as getting Dr. Dre and we don't like the direction he's going. Our puppet, he wants to break away, so we're going to dispose of him. But before doing so, we're going to press him into some cloning factory. That's more or less what I'm referring to. I should have been more clear about that.
No, that's all right. I mean, that's a whole other rabbit hole that we could probably do another episode on.
Yeah.
But to go back to the whole gravity thing, what never really sat well with me was how, the accumulation of clouds and condensation and all that, and how tons, like literally thousands of tons of water is just floating out in the atmosphere, and then it rains and it comes down. But where is gravity that entire time? But why didn't it accumulate? Why did it allow the accumulation to begin with in the first place? If these molecules are so light, why didn't gravity pull it down until it rained? Like it's never really sat well with me, and how gravity just only works sometimes.
It's selective too. Some things can float up, some things can come down. And this is what it comes down to: is the etymology of words. The truth will be in there. Like airplane is actually a craft flying over the air through the air above the plane. So it's an airplane. The Antarctica, the 360. Ice. Well, they call it the. There's actually a movie documentary called Antarctica 360. Basically called the 360 ice wall. But getting back to gravity, etymology is it goes back to the word gravitas, which means weight. So I don't mean to be disparaging to anybody, but if you have an average person sit on a chair, and you get maybe someone heavy set sit in the same chair, and that heavy set person breaks the chair, is it because of gravity or because of weight? And so, like I said, gravity is selective. Why can helium balloons go up? Why do dandelions go up? And they always use mass. This experiment in a shed with the Cavendish experiment, where these two bowling balls are attracted. Mass attracts mass. Then why doesn't two ships out at sea collide with each other? Every time they pass by, these so-called due to gravity. So, it's just like I said, the foundation's off, and all they have are lies stacked upon lies, stacked upon lies. And they really like to really push things that cannot be proven in the real world. And it's left out in this gray area where it's a constant cycle of debate. And that gets into space. Like, you'll bring up, again, like you mentioned, Mikey, about someone saying the tremendous rotation, the galaxy moving 1.3, and they'll give all these math equations, and it's because of, you don't understand, it's because planetary, the planetary orbit with gravity, all this. They'll explain it, but they cannot produce a factual evidence this is happening. So they're just repeating these things. And also, too, they like to make things extremely complicated, these math equations, where the average person says, you know what, I can't even grasp this. It's so complex. And they sound so articulate and well-spoken. I don't grasp it. They're so smart. It must be true. I'm just too dumb to understand it. So they make things the most complicated as possible and confusing as possible, where the average person will just like concede. And there's too many things. There's too many obstacles against flat Earth. The consensus, the bad stigma, all these teachers that never seen the curve of the Earth with their own eyes, claim they've seen it, through aboard an airplane, where Neil deGrasse Tyson says you can't even see it from 128,000 feet, but they're so sure they've seen it. There's even like articles debunking the flat Earth, where the Concorde jet at their maximum altitude of 60,000 feet, you can see the curve of the Earth. Well, that again goes against science, where supposedly you can't even see from 128,000 feet. So there's so many lies, and again, liars can't keep their lies straight, and that's that very simple. And again, people that want to debate these topics, they'll try to get into the field of mathematics, things that we're talking about, atmospheric conditions, refraction, a lot of things, and there's a lot of room for confusion when we need to stick to the basic foundations of, again, water's level.
I mean, there's dozens of videos of these weather balloons that are independently flown out there with cameras, and obviously at 120,000 feet, the horizon goes up to eye level. So it's almost as if it's infinite, whatever this plane is, but we can only see so far. So but these, the ISS, who claims to be at 73 or 250 miles up, I mean, we can't even go past 73 miles. On that day when I met that aeronautical engineer, we saw the Falcon 9 hit the firmament, and he even said that's firmament. And I was like, that's real? And he said, yeah, that's real. We haven't been in space. So we really haven't been to the moon. So I was like, oh, that's real. So the Bible is telling the truth, that we can't get through the firmament. And what it looked like a wake. So when the Falcon 9 was dragging across the sky, it looked like a giant water wake just expanding for hundreds of miles. And it was so massive that there was no way for you not to see it. If you were in Southern California all the way through Arizona, you could see it.
Yeah, and that's the big thing is you mentioned the Bible. It's funny because according to science, they measure this ball Earth. And we'll get into the dimensions. We talked a little bit about it, but we'll get into in more detail with that. But what I'm getting at is, biblically, it says in the Bible how the Earth is immeasurable, and they have it measured in science. So it's like they're opposing the Bible constantly. I want to talk about the dimensions of the so-called globe, but a big thing is that I made videos about is the stigma of the Bermuda Triangle off the coast of Florida. Of course, going to Bermuda itself. And it's a triangle, and the triangle, of course, has the 60-degree inner angle. So you have the numerology, the zeros mean nothing. So you literally have the 666. That's why you have the pyramid. It's a huge symbol in Freemasonry and the so-called Illuminati. It's because of the 666. That's what we're looking at. What I'm getting at is all these so-called launches by NASA, by SpaceX. They're off the coast of Florida, right next to the Bermuda Triangle. So it's a perfect way of keeping people away from that general vicinity where they're dumping off the rockets in that general area, where there's a stigma of ships disappearing. That's a good way of doing it. People not looking too deep, because that's where these ships are going. They're making sure everything's clear in that area as well before they launch, because obviously this is what it is. I said it so many times, where they're nothing more than expensive fireworks they're launching off. They're spending a tremendous amount of money, and the whole part of Jack Parsons and everybody else involved with rocketry obviously was not about making a rocket that can go into space. It's just making a rocket sound enough, good enough to get it up in the sky and create the illusion. Because of course they say, oh, it's due to this orbital travels. These rockets, they're traveling around multiple times around the so-called globe before they go into space. This is nonsense, and this is their reasoning. But yeah, and here's a big thing too. Getting back to the globe itself, and I talked to scientists about this, and they raged, and they didn't believe me at first, but I explained a lot of things about perspective and the globe, the so-called globe itself. I said, do you realize the so-called radius of this ball Earth is, under 4,000 miles? It's 3,959 miles. So based on that, literally, if you drive, for example, from San Francisco to Tampa, Florida, you're going 3,000. That's 3,000 miles, nearly 3,000 miles there. You're literally, that would be like going to 3/4 to the core of the Earth. And you look on the actual globe, that distance. Now go a bit further and go a bit further, and it doesn't add up as the radius being that measurement. But the big aspect I'll explain to people is obviously do the radius, circumference of just under 25,000 miles, the diameter just under 8,000 miles. Obviously, these are important formulas to get the calculations of the so-called ball Earth, where it's 8 inches per mile squared. And people always confuse. They think, oh, it's 8 inch. It's every 8 inches. No, it's 8 inches per mile square. So when you get to about 30 miles or half a mile, it's going to be about a 25% or quarter mile curvature. And that gets into airplanes and, supposedly going nose down. Here's the thing is, I actually, during video demonstrations, I showed flight instructors talking to trainee pilots while they're on the simulators, flight simulators. And, obviously it looks very realistic on the screen. And the trainer is telling the trainee, keep the nose up, keep it level, keep it level. Keep harping on keeping it level. Yeah. And again, traveling at 500 to 550,000, 500 to 550 miles per hour, and you do the math, and they keep saying keep it level, it just doesn't add up. You end up in space. So again, right. All these things. It's not just one thing. It's everything. There's so many holes in the whole globe. There's more holes than Swiss cheese in the whole ridiculous globe. And let's be honest, I'm just being very blunt. When we first get involved with flat Earth, there's a very uncomfortable feeling deep down inside. Like, wow, if I go in this, it's gonna, my perspective, the way people look at me, this, and this. People are concerned about that. But myself, it was a very easy transition, because I've covered so many lies, the moon landing, Titanic, all these, the jab, all these different aspects of this lie system we're living in, and of course things I mentioned when I was younger. So it was a very easy transition to make for me, and it wasn't relatively uncomfortable for me at all making videos on it. But I did get a backlash from my subscribers who said, "Oh, Russianvids, what are you doing? You do fantastic work. Now you're getting involved with this." I'm like, you guys never looked into it, just like everybody else. And if you're a truth seeker, you look into everything. You don't turn anything away. Look at it. Even how crazy it might sound, look at the evidence. Once you find a major hole in it, then you could, that can't be explained in any which way, then you could discard it. But do not just toss it out the window. Always keep an open eye. Always keep an open ear to everything. And after investigating, then you can toss out the window if it doesn't add up.
I mean, there's so many things that are being lied about, and our history is being lied about. Our our political system, just the monetary system. Everything is just one big lie. Why wouldn't they just include this in this scenario? Why wouldn't they?
Well, that's actually that gets back to the actual globe itself. That's the foundation of the lie, and again, when that's the foundation, and everything after that lies as well. It has to be built around the initial lie. But you hit on a great point about history being a lie, and what people don't realize, the occult, for example, when it comes to the 13 colonies, why do they create 13 colonies? In the Bible specifically, 13 is known as the number of rebellion, and it's given this illusion that these 13 colonies are rebelling against England, against Britain, when in reality it was just a big, it was just basically they're expanding their colony and trying to make it appear that like they're sovereign, just like in Australia when they're supposed to be sovereign, when it's South Wales and Queensland. It's all regarding, of course, England itself, which is ruling. And if as a child, I remember going back in time, back to 1981, when Prince Charles and Princess Diana supposedly got married, and it was on every single TV, and it was the biggest story. And it's like they're the focal point. They're the focal point, and they own and control it all, and they're showing this, presenting to the whole world. And I find it kind of funny too, not to deviate too far, but her name was Princess Di, and she supposedly died in the tunnel, and no real evidence besides no one can see it. It's in the tunnel,
right.
And we get this smashed up car, which it's not impossible, of course, to get up a smashed car. I'm deviating very far from what we need to be on, and that's the flat earth truth and this lie system. But what I'm getting at is we're living in a world where the foundation is off, and everything after that lies a lie as well. And they're literally created this false reality around us. And this is one thing I tell people that can't jump aboard flat earth, but they realize, and I'll just call it CVID, they realize this is a lie. But I explain to them, I say, you realize this is a lie, and all over, this flat earth we're living on, all these governments are going along with it. So you see there's this tremendous conspiracy with all these world leaders passing it off, Prince Albert, Prince Charles, all these famous celebrities, Tom Hanks, and you name it, supposedly contract it. You realize this is a hoax, but you can't see the construct and how they're lying about the ball earth, how they can manipulate and lie about that as well. So you can see where they're lying about this on a grand scale, but you say, oh, they must be all working together. Well, they obviously are, and they have been, and that's a big aspect, specifically with the Iranian health minister and his phony fake coughing, saying he has it, all this nonsense. But the main thing is, it's nothing new. It's this world stage, the fake beast between Russia and the U.S. and the so-called space race. When they're all in on it,
right.
People are not going to grasp it, And of course, they had the International Space Station. Here's the big thing I want to mention. I talk, getting back to the ISS. You mentioned there, Mikey, about 250 miles up and supposedly up there, and I had debates about it with people. This one nuclear engineer saying he believes it's up there. This. I'm like, why is there any footage of the construction? This massive,
Zero.
Football field side. We have footage, going back in time. Photos of the Statue of Liberty being built, hundreds of years ago. The Eiffel Tower, all these things, but there's no video, there's no imagery, photos, and his explanation is we didn't film it. This is his, not because he could have cited anything. He just made it up on his own. Obviously, when he said, "Oh, we don't want our trade secrets to get out," and I'm like, do you realize what you're saying? This is an international space station,
right,
where you have the U.S. initially docking with the Russian modules. So you're saying, oh, we don't want the technology, but you have two so-called enemies at the time, or they're sort of like working together now, docking together. So it's ridiculous. And these are already modules just connecting. What technology would be so advanced that you're trying to hide it from anybody? They're literally just two pieces of material connecting. So
Right.
you try to make the excuse. But like I said, that's all they have is, lies stacked upon lies and excuse after excuse. And a big one is with Donald Pettit, that one so-called astronaut. That's another planet named Astronaut. When he said he would go back to the moon in a nanosecond, but we don't have the technology anymore. It's been destroyed. And this is another topic of debate. And they made every excuse in the book. Well, they don't have the parts. They're obsolete. I'm like, before you destroy technology, why don't you make something better before you destroy the technology that was good enough to get you there? So it's like everything they're doing doesn't add up, doesn't make sense. They can get into space in the 60s all the way to 69, get to the moon supposedly in 69, but they don't have the technology to do today, which is absolutely absurd. Richard Branson, his Virgin Galactic, for over 15 years they failed to get into space, but they did in the 60s with seemingly not much issue. Ed White spacewalk in 1965, but technologies in the 90s and the 2000s, they supposedly get in there, just recently. So again, nothing about what they demonstrate makes sense. Here's one thing, and I won't go any further. I'll let you continue on there, Mikey. Is nothing they're doing aboard the ISS makes sense. They're just showing footage inside this, supposed structure in outer space. Why don't they show these astronauts, on the outside of the ISS, floating around, going around, seeing, pointing the camera in a 360 pan, looking at Earth, doing just a 360 pan going through space, looking at the sun, or pointing towards the sun. Nothing they're doing is remotely.
They don't do any of that.
None of it.
Because they can't.
No, exactly. And a simple thing is zooming in into the ball Earth, showing planes, planes going, for example, from Johannesburg, South Africa, say to Perth, Australia, showing cargo ships, say a ship going to Antarctica. That'd be the coolest thing ever. Look at this footage of this cargo ship docking in Antarctica. This would prove, more importantly, proving the globe is, why don't they just fly a plane over the top, or fly over Antarctica, come around the other side, say for example from South America to Australia. Never happened once, but they of course flown in a circle above the plane, around, but they never done that. So there's so many holes, and that gets into satellites, where if you look at Google themselves, with their Google images, Google Maps, people don't think about these things, and that's the problem with people. They don't they don't think, they just regurgitate. Is when you look at so-called Google satellite images of the Earth, you can zoom in. You can actually zoom into, like, say, big cities, urban areas, see people actually physically walking across crosswalks. You see literal cars, you see trees, but you don't see any airplanes from the perspective. Here's the problem. When you look at Flight Radar 24, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of planes constantly up in the sky at 30,000 feet, 35,000 feet. So where are all these planes? We don't see any of them. And what it comes down to is Google has a fleet of airplanes mapping the world in 3D. There's an article, and I think the article is from Gizmo.com, and they talk about Google's fleet of planes. So literally, they're mapping the world the same way they do on ground. They just have cars going in every single. It's painstaking, but they have their Google cars, Google vans go around all the streets, and they're mapping, as far as the street perspective. And the same thing they're doing with the planes. They're zipping along, zipping above, and this is how they're mapping the world. And people say, but what about GPS? And I tell them, I said, look, I had a conversation back in 2015. I made a videos calling satellites in deep space a hoax. And I was contacted just after the video was made, a day or two after, by a man that worked for Rogers Telecommunication in Canada. He goes, you're absolutely right. So how do I know this? I work for Rogers Telecommunications. I laid under ocean fiber optic cables, and this is the core of the internet, GPS, which works off high-powered ground towers. So he goes on to say, working for Rogers, Rogers owns multiple sports franchises. They own the Toronto Raptors, the Toronto Blue Jays. I think he said also the Tampa Lightning, about 3 or 4 sports franchises. But the big thing, he goes, but here's the thing is, we don't own a single satellite in space. We have all this money, all these funds, and I'm doing this. And so, yeah, he says you're absolutely right. And it's just basically all Toronto Blue Jays. I think he said also the Tampa Lightning, about 3 or 4 sports franchises. But the big thing, he goes, but here's the thing is, we don't own a single satellite in space. We have all this money, all these funds, and I'm doing this. And so, yeah, he says you're absolutely right. And it's just basically all smoke and mirrors when it comes to these technologies. And here's another thing too, and I'm going on a bit too long, but here's the big thing too. You had with Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, he went on this one video from the Facebook headquarters, and he was talking about how he wants to launch planes, flight planes, I should say, over Africa to give them the internet. So why would that be necessary if we have satellites in space? Why fly planes over Africa to give them internet? And this is something I've covered many years ago. And so, like I said, people have to look at all these avenues, all the research I've done, and every avenue I looked, and the contradictions are there. And the reason people can't put this all together is they haven't taken the time to look at every aspect and removing the preconceived notion about many things, and they're afraid to come to the conclusion that they've been lied to.
Yeah, I mean, you just brought up a good point about the whole, that way people in Africa can have internet. It's just so they can track everybody to make sure everybody's got the JAB.
Yeah.
The magic juice.
Yes, that's great point. And that's all it's all leading to is complete control. It's all about control. And that's one thing, getting back to the monetary system, which you mentioned earlier about it being a lie. And I tell people this that don't understand the whole thing about the jab is, well, they're losing a lot of money. I'm like, you don't understand. It's not about money. Money's like their money. They just print it. It's like monopoly money. It's about control. Money means most of the people that don't have it, and that's most of society. They're focused on it, but they're literally, they can print all the money they want. It's not about the money. It's about control. And that's the major aspect that people say follow the money. No, it's not follow the money. It's follow those that are in control, and they're using money as like a weapon, like a carrot to bait people and trap people into a corner. And that's where people are not getting it. And that's the old saying, follow the money. But that small scale, that could be true, but large scale, no. That's money is just
When was the last time that they spoke about the many trillions of dollars that were that the country's in national debt? They haven't talked about it in years. I think the last time they talked about it was when, I don't know, I think Trump was in office right when he took over from Obama's campaign run. Or
you're exactly right, and that gets back to all these reliefs that are happening financially with people, and they're very, very like I said, they're very savvy the way they operate, basically pacifying the public and throwing money at them, to kind of like to make us look like the good guy. But it's literally just, in the public side, it's meaningful, but to them it's just, transferring some bones into people's accounts, and or sending a check to someone or giving them a debit card. And this is, part of, just like Bush did, he was sending out checks to millions of people, or not him, but the people behind him. But his face was on it. What I'm getting at is they're always portray themselves as trying to help. It's so complex, and this is why they get away with what they do. Is these tactics of, we're so caring, but it's just part of the deception that the deception runs too deep, and people can't go there. And that's kind of reminds me of that song by that one group called Supertramp. the English band. We all know
Mhm.
about that cover with those famous buildings and the perspective out of an airplane on their album cover with that one woman holding that glass of orange juice over those famous buildings. And you flip it around, you have that, the nine, and the one and the one right over.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm not aware of that.
Yeah. I have to show you that. You can just Google it. You can Google right now, Supertramp album cover reversed, and you'll see that. And this is how they work. These people that run this world, they invert things, they flip things. This gets back to Crowley. Crowley, he taught people to think. He instructed people, involved with the occult, to think backwards, read backwards, listen to phonographic records in reverse, say the Lord's Prayer backwards. So these things they do in opposites, like the Michael Jackson backslide. These weren't devised out of thin air. It's all about the occult, and people do not grasp these things. For example, the space shuttle launches, they're counted down backwards. People like those young rappers, Criss Cross, they wore their clothes backwards. There's many things they do. In the Bible, where Noah in Leviticus, was it 10:6, where he told his sons not to keep their hair unkept and not to tear their clothes. And look at all these rock stars; they have their sloppy, long hair that's in all directions, and they have the ripped jeans, the ripped clothing, and these are not just pushed out there for no reason. These are controlled entities that are being pushed out to the masses upon millions of people. And of course, these young people, they just emulate what they see on TV, MTV. They go to the long hair, they wear the ripped clothes, not knowing the deeper implications. It's doing things against the Bible. But again, a huge aspect is doing things in reverse. They love the opposite. But getting back, I'm getting off track, but getting back to Supertramp and that album cover, they have one song that's called The Logical Song. And the lyrics go, how there's times when the world's asleep, the questions run too deep just for a simple man, and it goes on and on about questioning things. And why don't you sign here so you sound logical, represented like you're presentable, a vegetable. The lyrics, they always give us this truth in the lyrics. Another one is Meatloaf. People don't understand, why does he call himself Meatloaf? Meatloaf, batted to hell. Meatloaf is 33 numerology. That's why he goes by the Meatloaf. But he has a song, Life's a Lemon. And during my video presentations over the years, I played the lyrics from the song where it goes, everything's a lie and that's a fact. Life's a lemon. I want my money back. What about your schools? They're useless. They're nothing but a pack of lies. So it's the duality aspect of putting the truth in entertainment and lies in the textbooks and in the news. And it's just a world that's, flipped upside down. And it talks about in the Bible, like the potter who, flips things over. And, I don't have that verbatim, but about flipping things over, flipping things around. And that gets back to, the scene with the Simpsons, Homer Simpson. By the way, Simpson in numerology is 33. That's why they love that name, Simpson, like Bart Simpson, Homer, and the rest. But in '97, of course, they had the comic book. I got to be careful. I don't want to go into too much detail about those two famous buildings and the dollar sign with that number 9 in the two buildings. And then also they had this one scene with Homer in a hammock, and there's a clock, and you flip over the image, and it shows the time at the, I'll just say 11:09 and put it in reverse.
Right.
And that's what they were showing. So they've done this many times. Back to the Future. That's one thing I gotta mention to you, Mikey. There's a lot of flat Earth and that New York event intertwined in movies. For example, Back to the Future, they show the flat Earth clock in the very beginning with the clock sequence. During the whole sequence of clocks in the background, people don't, they're so distracted by so many things happening. While that dog food can is moving, there's a clock in the background that has a flat Earth map on the clock. underneath the dome, underneath that glass lens. There's a
Oh.
flat Earth model. And
I
later on,
wasn't aware of that.
yeah, you definitely got to take a look at that. By the way, this is predictive programming. This is what they're all about. They tell us what's going to happen later on in the movie in the very beginning. If people paid attention, if you watch the movie again, look at all the clocks, and you're going to see one individual hanging by the arms of a clock in the very beginning sequence. That happens later in the movie with Doc Brown hanging from the clock tower.
Yeah.
So they're showing you what's going to happen. It's predictive programming. So they're planting a seed, and how many people have seen that? But it's there. And no, even truthers don't mention that. It's there. But getting to Back to the Future, they mention Copernicus, who of course is well known for pushing the globe in the very beginning. It was really Pythagoras that really came up with the whole bald earth lie. Then later on, Copernicus is the one that really put it out there as quote truth. But what I'm getting at is if you look at the wrapping of the flat Earth, and if you watch Back to the Future #2, there's a scene where old man McFly enters this one room and he's upside down. Remember that scene? You got to watch Back to the Future 2, where there's old man McFly. He enters a room and he has some injury, so some kind of contraptions hanging him upside down. So he's literally floating upside down in the class. So what I'm getting at is this: most of everybody in the room is right side up, but he's upside down. They're looking at the TV and they're flipping the channels. First they show Twin Pines, and then they flash the famous buildings in New York, and then they showed those two buildings. The TV's is acting up. So from our perspective, the buildings are going up. Those two famous buildings in New York. But from his perspective, being upside down, they're coming down.
Oh,
and
wow.
the reason you know it's in New York as well, because situated in that living room is the Statue of Liberty with the torch.
Oh, what the
That's
heck?
right next to the couch.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so they're showing the whole New York harbor and what's going to happen back in 1989, 1990 with Back to the Future. They're telling us that it's talking about Back to the Future, but they're showing us the future in Back to the Future. So here's a big thing too, and this is so important. I'm hitting on this topic, and I'll stop at this because I'll go on and on and on. Is people need to look at Michael Jackson's "Dance on the Blood Floor" album from '97, where his arms in a position like a clock, and I'll say it backwards. One's at 11, one's at 9. His arm position. And it's a caricature of him. It's not actually, it's a painting of, it's the Dance of the Blood Floor. They're showing Masonic tile floors, the black and white. Mm-hmm. But the big thing is in the back, behind him, is they have one building. They only show one building from New York, one building. And next to that building is the Pyramid Building. And that's the same, that's exactly what they're showing is the future. There's only going to be one building. Because if you look at the Freedom Tower today, next to it is a pyramid building, just like it's depicted in that album cover. So they're saying, well, that's not the two buildings, it's only one. They're showing us what's just like the Twin Pines becomes the Lone Pine Mall. With the Lone Pine Mall was the Twin Pines. Then they went back in time, and later on it was the Lone Pine Mall. So the two becomes one. So with that album cover with Michael Jackson, again, quote, "Dance on the Blood Floor," with his arms pointing at like it's a clock at, again, backwards 11 and 9, and showing the one. And you guys actually see it to really, picture says 1,000 words. So when you see that one building in New York, it's like, wow, they're telling us it's going to end up being one building, and look at the clouds, the way they're shaped. And so they're literally, and this is a huge aspect with Hollywood and the music industry. They're not going to just have random people enter and produce. They're going to be selected Freemasons in specifically Hollywood to be a writer, director, producer. To be in the music industry, you're going to be someone that has foreknowledge. Just like, Jackie Stallone supposedly predicted all these events on her website, Psychic, when of course her son's a very, very powerful man, of course a Mason, and he has foreknowledge. It's passed on, and there's no secret, or magical psychic ability. These are planned events, and just the structure of people in power, and of course, people in Hollywood. And Hollywood's all about, of course, the holly tree made out of, witchcraft, magic wands were made out of Hollywood. So it all adds up with Hollywood magic and Disney magic. But in closing, on this topic, people need to understand that celebrities, they're really propped up, of course, in this world when it comes to news events, because they have a major impact, a major influence on society. This is why whenever there's a major event, they're always, using Sean Penn with the political aspect about George Bush, or all these events are happening on the world stage today. You have Tom Hanks, Madonna, all these big names, because society, they idolize these people, and they're going to they want to be on their side, and they're just going to go with their famous celebrity. So bigger influence than actually the politicians are the famous celebrities, who they're called stars, and that's another mockery with the stars in the heavens. So it goes deep. That's why they have the fallen stars on the Walk of Fame, because they literally represent the fallen angels, the fallen stars, as mentioned in Revelation.
I hadn't thought of it that way.
Yeah, and you know what's funny? One last thing, and I'm so sorry, I thought to stop. Talking about the Walk of Fame, they have, this is funny, it's reserved for actors, but they have Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and the third astronaut, I forgot his name. They all have their own.
Michael
place.
Collins, did you say that?
Yeah, but it's instead of a star, they have a moon. And all three of them. Michael Collins, I think it's Michael Collins. I forgot which the third one was, but all three of them, and they have a place on the Walk of. They call it the Walk of Fame. I call it the Hall of Shame. That's what it really comes.
Because they're all actors.
Yeah, I think that's what they're saying. They're literally saying they're actors. We can get into the aspect of them being confronted, the astronauts being confronted, if you want to move on to something else. But that's a topic I like to discuss with the confrontation of the astronauts. We can go there now or later. It's completely up to you.
Oh man, yeah, it's been 2 hours, 14 minutes. I'm sure. I mean, I love the long form podcasts. I mean, the longer the better. I mean, that's just my personal taste.
Yeah,
but,
I know this is gonna be edited, and I'll just let this will be edited out. Of course, we can take out whatever you want, leave in, do whatever you want. But I'd really like to run over the how they're manipulating, controlling all sides of the Matrix, and that gets into the man named Bart Sibrel. And basically, Bart Sibrel's the one that confronted Buzz Aldrin. Buzz Aldrin was confronted by this man named Bart Sibrel about faking the moon landings. And this man, Bart Sibrel, he was employed by NBC. He was embedded, and his special, a funny thing happened on the way to the moon, was presented on later on a Fox TV station. So he's supposed to be this hero confronting the astronauts about not going to the moon. They all get angry. They all get upset. The reactions are real. But it was set up where these astronauts did absolutely nothing. They accomplished nothing. They've never been in space. But the people running this world, they're psychopaths. And it's like a roast. When you're involved in Freemasonry, you go through the ritualistic initiation, like they put a blindfold around you, they put a noose around your neck, all these things. So what I'm getting at is, it's a form of ritualistic humiliation, like a roast. So what I'm getting at is, people are like, are you sure about that? This sounds kind of like a stretch. Well, here's the thing is, how was this man able to enter each astronaut's home after astronaut and confront them all about the fake moon landing? Why didn't one of the astronauts say, hey, there's a man named Bart Sibrel he confronted me. Say it's Buzz Aldrin, the first one. Hey, there's a man named Bart Sibrel. Came in my house. I let him in my house. I thought it was going to be a legit interview about the moon landing, and he confronted me saying it's fake. Don't let them in your house. Don't do an interview with them. Doesn't make sense. So I believe what happened is they're all confronted and they're all told after the fact, hey, I was sent here by the same people that are paying you, and this is a setup. There's no other explanation how they can go, this man, Bart Simpson, go to house after house after house and interview and confront these astronauts about the fake moon landing and get away with it. I mean, he could do it to one astronaut, but to keep doing it, to keep entering house after house with the astronauts, it doesn't make sense. So there's something really fishy going on with that.
Well, it had to be planned, and Absolutely. So they were looking for someone to slip.
Well, it was planned, and the reason it was done was it was like a gag on the astronauts because they rarely do interviews. How was this man, Bart Sibrel, able to do the interviews? I mean, literally, you look at Neil Armstrong, the first man to supposedly walk on the moon. He's done less than a handful of interviews throughout the years because they're afraid of them saying the wrong things, too many interviews, too many contradictions, and so they want to minimize that because they're afraid of something being wrong. A big thing is, of course, not going on too long here, is you had this one 8-year-old girl with her father filming this, and this one interview with Buzz Aldrin, like impromptu type of interview that the father's filming, this little girl asking Buzz Aldrin, why haven't we gone back to the moon in such a long time? That's what she sounded. And he goes, that's not a question by 8-year-old. That's something I want to know, but I think I know. And he held his heart, put his hand on his chest. He goes, because we've never been there, and that's the way it happened. And it pained him to say that. He couldn't look in that little girl's eye and lie to her. You know, and I don't know if you've seen that or not, but
oh yeah,
okay, you've seen that. But what I'm getting at is, obviously, this never made the mainstream media. You know, and you show this to people, and the program is so strong, they're just like they'll try to write it off. They'll look for every excuse in the book. So yeah, there's a lot of proof, a lot of evidence, but unfortunately, these proofs and evidence are meaningless to those that are completely mind controlled by the people that are in power and that are above them, that keep them locked in a box, keep them deceived their whole lives, again, from birth to death.
Well, anyone who would have seen that, they would just disregard it because they don't want their belief to be destroyed. Absolutely.
Yeah. They're gonna just find every excuse in the book and write it off as, This is what happens. It's just like anytime you debate someone about flat Earth and you bring up a point that they can explain, that really proves that we live in a flat plane, they'll just basically skip over it, like you never even asked a question,
right?
And then move on to something about. Well, what
they'll
about
focus something. They'll focus on something that you can't debunk, and they'll just
some shadows or the shadows on the moon or blah blah blah. Nothing to do with the actual, land that the ground we're walking on, and obfuscate and So that's what it comes down to. I no longer do debates with these individuals because it's literally a waste of time. And as far as they use straw man tactics, like you mentioned earlier, stating things like, you believe you live on a disc, floating in space, and that's not my position. But the main thing is, no matter what strong evidence we have, due to the bad stigma, it's really at a handicap, no matter how powerful the evidence is, and that's the unfortunate truth. Is people are going to go with consensus. Consensus rules. Truth doesn't really matter. Evidence doesn't matter in this world, and that's the sad reality.
All right. Yeah, your last episode, you were talking about how, you were just talking about how they have these deceptive stories that are planted, and last week we had that whole Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie. And I was thinking about it before your episode. I'm like, Brian Laundrie, if you rearrange the words, you can spell brain, and his last name means washing, so brainwashing. And I couldn't figure out Gabby Petito until I watched your episode, and then you kind of like, it was petite goat or something like that.
No, it was I
Pet
pet
goat.
goat. Yeah, just like in the classroom in Sarasota, Florida, and supposedly went missing on the same date of that very famous date. Went missing, and the pet goat the same exact day as well, and the goat is Baphomet, and the goats go down, and Jesus separated the sheep from the goats. So the goat is in the name. It's just like I'm not getting off topic, but it's so very important. Just like a lot of our fabricated news, they love the cultic names like Richard Ramirez. There's the Ram in the name, and also it's Mar as in Mars. So, for example, Aries is the astrological sign is the Ram. You know, it's also has to do with Mars. You know, so you have Mars, and Mars backwards is Ram. There's Ram in Mars as well, and that's the sign. It's the Ram for Aries. So everything's like kind of interconnected in a very strange way. But like I said, there's a lot of play on names, like the first woman in space supposedly for NASA, anyways. Her name is Sally Ride. Like she's taking a ride in space. You know, they had like the man that supposedly showed his wiener, Anthony Weiner, showing up. These kind of ridiculous things. These actors on the world stage. The SFO plane incident where you had the pilots, they used these names like We Too Low, Holy F, Bang Ding Ow, and they blame it on an intern when it was just made. These are psychopaths behind all this nonsense.
And they're just laughing at us.
And here's the big thing is I know someone that works for the airlines at San Francisco, but I literally live like 8-minute drive from the airport. And I know a friend that was working there for 17 years at the time. And I presented this stuff. He goes, "Oh, come on. You're killing me. No way." And then I showed him the evidence of the CNN footage of the plane coming down, everything. He goes, "Yeah, that doesn't make sense." And he was breaking it all down and goes, "You're right." Because I said, "Yeah, you gotta look at the stuff, man. You gotta look at it and not just toss it out the window." He goes, "Yeah, man. I don't know what to say, but definitely that doesn't add up with the supposed passengers, doing interviews and they're walking perfectly fine when this plane literally crashes, belly flops as hard as their backs would have been broken. They wouldn't. You have all the people. You look at the footage. All these people are walking out. They're getting their luggage. Their luggage is locked in the lower compartment, and they're all walking out with these huge pieces of luggage. It's not like the ones you'd carry in your overhead. It was just a big drill, and the planes didn't match up. Some of the planes, some angles, the grass was tall, some were short. It's not on purpose. And here's the big thing: the one kid that was being interviewed. The most famous aspect is that one young kid being interviewed. He was wearing an orange shirt and it had the skeleton for the skull and bones on it for Freemasonry. So they're always going to give us this clue. One of the girls, she was wearing, again, the reverse. She had 11-9 on her jacket. Supposedly she was hit by a fire truck. That's the only person that perished, supposedly. And talking about perish, there was an event at this nightclub in Florida. And the names of the doctors. One was Dr. Parrish. Another was Dr. Lube. They had all these planned names we know what kind of nightclub it was. It wasn't a straight nightclub. So you had Dr. Lube for this nightclub, and the main doctor was Dr. Parrish. Just like that one school, you had the one man operating the bodies. I got to be careful. I got to word it. His name was Dr. Carver. What they do? They're carving, they're cutting, they're carving. So, they've done this. And one big thing that's been ongoing, a gag, is the Batman thing. We talked about it earlier with Aurora with the Batman event. After that, you had Boston with the Joker. His name is Jokar, but it's really Joker. And he was wearing a 33 hat. There's a 3 on one side, 3 on the other. You go to France, you had the Bataclan, the Bat. You had that one event in Virginia, a Bang Bang event with a reporter, and the names end up being like Burt Ward. The names when you the plan names were the Batman character's real name. His name is Adam Ward. So it's like the first and last name of the two characters from Batman. So, and where did the bug start from? The bug started from a bat, supposedly. This ongoing nonsense started from a bat. So they have the Batman theme, and that gets back to, more importantly, episode number 33 from the original Batman series, where they were having these cocktails during a party, and all these people were in this living room, and there was made mention of the man in the portrait, and they said that's Bruce Wayne's great grandfather. And I heard he was a member of Skull and Bones. And the lady says a member. No, sir, he founded Skull and Bones. So Batman's great grandfather founded Skull and Bones Freemasonry. So the connection with Freemasonry and Batman and all these events with the bat. There's an event in Townsville with this one child who was deceased, and he was in this coffin, and he was wearing a Batman outfit. And you don't see him in there, but you see the top of the Batman's costume, the top of the head sticking out, and then all these superheroes speak. It was just an absolute 100% stage nonsense. But what we're getting at is just like the whole Bart Sibrel fiasco. There are psychopaths behind all of this, and they have a very interesting sense of humor. And I said it many times. People laugh, but it's the truth. They call themselves the Illuminati because they're illuminated and they're naughty. You know, just like when you have like SCX on the so-called ball Earth again flipped upside down. So the first image in X amount of years of the ball Earth was back in 2016. Mm-hmm. They show that, here's our first image since blah blah blah. Our second full image from space of the full ball Earth, and has SCX in the clouds. And what I'm getting at is even going back further, when they had the Mir space station, the Russian supposed Mir space station, it was hilarious. I did a video presentation on that. You had the CNN correspondent smiling and laughing, or the whole thing covering the Mir. He's showing like literally cartoons, animation of the Mir in space. It was just literally, and he's just smiling and laughing the whole time. And they're going to get a vantage point of it coming back to Earth because it basically expired. It did its time. They're going to have it crash back down to Earth. So where was it going to be filmed from? It was filmed from off of the Fiji Islands, off this one town named Nate, Nati, Nate, like Illuminati.
Yeah.
Just like, and this gets back to that one event in New York. Who filmed the plane? It was the Nate brothers, like the Illuminati brothers. They're the planned names. Remember that? They're in the streets of New York, and they turn the camera around. They're doing this with the French and the U.S. Firefighters doing a joint exercise in the streets, and they said the Nade brothers filmed this. So it's the Nade, it's a complete play on names, and talking about play on names, the first, people don't know this, even people involved in the science, they don't know this. The man that conceived the whole concept of the space telescopes is a man named Lyman. He's a Lyman Spitzer. So it was a Spitzer space telescope before there was the Hubble, and he was a Skull and Bones Freemason from Yale. He was first at Princeton, then went to Yale, and after 33 years, he became he moved up a higher level after 33 years. So definitely the planned names is always present with a lot of these events. Like, here's another one too, Bernie Madoff. Like, he made off with your money. You know, that's one I always, these people are laughing. Like, it's like, to them, it's like this. Let's be honest with all of us. In life, you look for certain levels. Like, for example, you want to buy a house. After you do that, it's mission accomplished. And first you get it. It's like you got your dream house or whatever you accomplish in life, but you're looking for new things to keep you going, keep you entertained, keep you pushing forward. These people have all the money, they have all the power. Now let's just play with the world. It's like that scene from Flash Gordon when Ming the Merciless is with Clytus aboard the spaceship, and he goes, "Earth, and they go, what a bunch of pathetic Earthlings." And Clytus goes to Ming, "Do you want to destroy this Earth?" He goes, "No. Let's play with it for a while before annihilation." And then he starts laughing. It's kind of like the psychopath, kind of like what they're doing now. They're giving us another truth. And another interesting thing about Flash Gordon is a scene with Flash fighting one of these winged birds, human, with the wings. I forgot the name of the character. Hawk. They were the Hawkmen, and they were fighting on this platform. And Flash is saying, "Don't you see it's Ming that he wants us fighting? Let's group together. Let's fight Ming. We can do this." And that's the same concept of Star Trek, with the Klingon King and Kirk fighting aboard the Enterprise. And Kirk tells King, "Don't you see there's a being out there? It's this cloud that's manipulating all this, making us fight. Throw it on your sword. Don't let this entity have us fight." And he convinced King to throw a sword. And the Klingons stopped fighting to bridge the Enterprise. And that entity no longer had power through manipulation. That's the same thing that's happening now. If people realize what's happening, the manipulation, they're less than the 1%. If people woke up, they're done. They're completely done. But people are so wrapped up in this lie system, the divide and conquer, keeping the eyes off those that rule and the eyes on each other. And you control the media, you control the minds, and they have a stranglehold in the media, of course. And they have complete mind control over society.
Yeah, I mean, everything's designed intentionally. I mean, we work 8 hours, sometimes 10 hours a day, and then we get home, we have to cook dinner for our family, and then we barely have time to sit down and watch our favorite TV shows or watch the sports games. I mean, that's why the sports go on from season to season, and they overlap each other. So when the football's done, you can move on to basketball, and when basketball's done, you can move on to hockey and baseball and so forth. So it's never ending. So if you're really into sports, you don't have time to look into conspiracies and test the news and do research. I mean, who has time for that?
Yeah, and that's a big thing. And to be blunt, a lot of people involved with this, I know personally, they're self-employed. They have more free time on their hands to look at things. And when you're so caught up in this world, like you just mentioned, work, then entertainment, you barely have time for anything, family, mortgage, you put everything together, and now you're putting another responsibility. Now they have to think for themselves. It's like, no, there's already people out there in the media doing it. Now you're putting another responsibility. I don't want to. They don't have the tools, by the way. They don't have the tools to investigate things. They've never done it before. They never look at anything. But I'll tell you right now, I know people that really rejected a lot of things I've said. I'll even say it. I had a former boss at a job. On social media, he deleted me because I was calling the event in Boston a fabrication. But later on, it's funny, I ran into him in the streets. I explained things to him in detail. And after that, we got to be back to being friends and talk to him on the phone. And he's obsessed with the truth and talk to me all the time about it. And it's funny because his wife told me, goes, you changed this man, and now he's obsessed with truth. Before, he was a completely different person. Now he's looking at everything. He sees things with new eyes now, and that's thanks to you. Yeah, it's like anything else, It's like truth is like how can I say it? Information is like digesting a meal. It takes time. Once you consume something, your body has to process it, digest it. And the problem with people is, before you can digest the information, the mind blocks it off. Yeah. The mind blocks it off from, it's like, I don't want to use the term antivirus, like a computer, but like you're trying to download something, and it might be nothing bad at all, but the antivirus blocks it off, and the program can't be downloaded. It's rendered useless. And that's what the mind is doing. It's thinking, it's because of the strong brainwashing, the programming, the mind initially is taking the information as as a bad information, and it's discarding it right away, just like the antivirus in your computer. When it's not, it's a false positive. Like some programs on my own computer, I'm downloading things that are 100% legit, but it's foreign to the computer, doesn't understand, and it's being quarantined in the antivirus software of the computer. So that's, what I learned is this. Basically, like I said earlier, adults, they're literally just grown children, and their parents are the government. And don't talk bad about my parents when you talk bad about their favorite politician, about their, the favorite news station, or the government in general. It's funny. They might mention some things they don't like about the government, but if you go totally anti-government, then they go ballistic, because again, it's their whole core system is wrapped around that. If you remove that, they don't. It's like a hermit crab. You remove their safety, you remove their shell, and they're very vulnerable, and they're scared. They don't know what direction to go. They don't know what to do. So they're just sticking that safety. It's just like someone stuck at a job. They stay there because of fear. They're miserably comfortable at a job. It just pays enough to have them get by in this world, but they're unhappy. But they're stuck there because they're afraid of the unknown. And that gets back to people. They're afraid when you're presented with something. Yeah, it makes sense, but you're one of very few people that are talking about this. And the problem is there's very few truth speakers that really can articulate it and have it down well, because there's no university for this. I kind of joke. I said about Jaron and David Weiss being baby truthers, a while ago, because I disagreed on a topic with them, and I kind of joke about there's RV Truth University, but in reality is there's no guidebook. There's nothing like we can just go to, and we have to just rely on what could be proven. And we're all like very liquid while we seek the truth. On their side of it, they have tons and tons and tons of fake, phony literature they take as truth. Mm-hmm. Like they'll watch someone on TV speak, or they always have that kind of programming. They'll have like a library, stacks and stacks of books on a shelf. That equates to them being well-read, very educated. Look how many books they read. That's just a prop. It's a prop to make them seem very intelligent, and that gets back to, being involved with truth is a difficult journey because there's a lot of pitfalls along the way. And the major problem is this: when you're involved with truth, is be so very careful to anybody out there speaking truth. If you're not sure about something, be honest. Say you don't know. Because if you make an error in judgment, that's always going to be attached to you. And people are going to, you could be right about 100 things. You're wrong about one thing. When you're involved in this aspect, in this world of truth, if you're wrong about one thing, you get something wrong, they're going to harp on that. All those other 100 things you're right about, it doesn't mean anything. They're going to harp on that. So it's a very, very tough road to go down, and you're going to be under a microscope by people, that go with consensus, go with all the lies. And even though there's contradictory in those textbooks and in science, they'll just ignore that, of course, and focus. Because it's like left and right politics, even though that's fake and phony. Mm-hmm. They're already taken aside. They already, and what it comes down to is this: when it comes to truth, you're planting a seed, and really they have to. They don't want to ever think it's because of, quote, you woken up. They always want, because of their pride, it's always they want it to be them. They're the ones that figured it out. So it's better to plant a seed, with those seeds you planted, let it sprout, and then figure it out. Due to pride, it's better them come to the conclusion than sometimes we kind of like bang on about it too much, and then their ego's going to say, yeah, this guy basically showed me that I was fooled. I was duped. And no one likes to admit they've been had and they were conned. And it's, again, I said it a million times. The biggest enemy of truth is one's own ego, and the ego is holding a lot of people back in this world from seeing what's really going on.
Yeah, one of the, a lot of people just don't understand why it's so important to open our eyes and accept that, that the world is flat, because it opens the door to so many different things. Like, my life has improved so much better, and like, I'm healthier. I don't eat meat. I eat some meat, but not all the time. Like, I stay away from chicken if I can possibly can, but I don't eat pork. I don't eat beef, and
That's the start. Yeah.
and I can't get away from dairy, but it's really difficult. But I almost don't eat chicken at all if I
That's
can
great.
help it.
That's great, because I always push people getting away from meat products. A doctor, even doctors, it's just like I said about the level. Some guy, showing you how to level things at a distance. He'll talk about water being level, and it's always 100% accurate. Well, doctors will always talk about, you're eating too much meat. You got to eat more vegetables. You got to eat more vegetables. And when it comes down to it, we can sustain ourselves, and I've done for many years, without consuming meat. I still occasionally have cheese. I don't drink milk. I drink almond milk, coconut milk.
Same
But
here.
that's the only thing, is maybe some cheese, like a vegetarian pizza. But as far as meat products, no. And people say, well, this vegetarian vegan thing is a NWO agenda. I'm like, if that's true, every single fast food restaurant would be vegetarian or vegan. They're not.
Right.
So that's whole, because we have to understand this system we're living in. Obviously, just think about how ridiculous it is. I mean, let's be honest. Just drinking milk. We're drinking milk from a cow. Every animal drinks milk. A calf drinks from the cow itself. Baby sheep, goats, all these animals drink from but we're drinking from. If someone says, "Oh, there's bottled milk from a female human," and they say, "Oh my gosh, that's disgusting," but that's the brainwashing. It's perfectly fine in society to drink milk from a cow, because obviously they're using a cow because it can produce milk in mass quantities compared to a female human, and they don't want to farm female humans, so we're going to use a cow against their will and just stick them in these cages and do this. But what I'm getting at is, it's as you journey down the truth, you're going to go down these paths. The further you go down, you're going to realize, and to me, the reason people stick with me, and I'm so glad it's a gradual thing, and that's how I did it too. I'm just being blunt. I didn't just go cold turkey. It was my family were farmers. They're farmers, and they, did all these things, butchered all this stuff with cows and chickens, all that. At a young age, I wanted to be a vegetarian. I tried to go cold turkey when I was like very young. I got weak. I felt sick because I did it too fast. It's got to be a gradual process, and you're doing it the right way to slowly get away from completely eating meat. But what I'm getting at, it's selfish. If we can sustain ourselves with fruits, vegetables, nuts, seeds, and grains, potatoes. I mean, there's so many dishes I make that are absolutely delicious. The problem is people they think oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? You just got to be creative, and if you have a heart, you're going to at least try to wean yourself off of it. And like I said, I'm not giving anybody a hard time if they're still doing it but they're trying to get away with it. It's people that refuse, and they make every excuse. The book, I'm like, look, like I said, we can live without the slaughter of animals. You don't want to do it because your selfishness, because you like the taste of meat. That's the only reason. Because you love the hamburger, you love the barbecue, but in reality, you're being selfish. Here's the thing: is how many times when someone's sitting down eating a steak or eating a hamburger from McDonald's that's wrapped in these packages, how many times do they even think about the poor animal that was killed? None. They don't think about it.
No.
It's because they're so brainwashed in society. It's not even a thing. They don't consider that. It's just, and that's how, obviously the people that run this world, they know how the human mind works, obviously, and they're masters at manipulation. And what it comes down to is this: the pyramid structure as well. We're the very top of the pyramid. They're enlightened. Everybody else is dumbed down, ignorant. And this is a means of control through ignorance. That's why it's so important to keep the populace dumbed down on every single angle. And here's a big thing is, let's say everybody's in on it. No, because, for example, someone might be part of a fake news story, They think they're the only ones. Like, oh, we're part of this event. We don't know the rest of them are fake, but they want to do this one, but they don't know how far it goes in these other ones and how large the scale is. Um, I can't read minds in every single situation. I know they actually reuse some of these people, but what I'm getting at is just like NASA, someone sitting behind, for example, in NASA Space Center, when the rock goes off. I can't say for a fact if that person knows if that rocket's landing in the ocean or not. But for example, the people building the rockets, they're just building components to it.
They had no
when
clue.
It's assembled, it's a whole different story.
Yeah.
So the deception, like the old saying goes, it's all it's all by compartmentalized, and that's basically the structure where people are so focused on what they're doing, they don't realize what others do. One thing I want to mention too is space shuttles, the whole space shuttle program. That this is something that needs to be talked about more. Of course, it's no longer implemented, but basically we know these space shuttles are shaped just like airplanes. And the big thing is this: people don't realize is space shuttles supposedly when they're launched, they expel all their jet fuel on the initial launch. So literally, they go into space, no jet fuel, no nothing. They're just coasting around in the vacuum of space. When they come back in supposedly Earth's orbit, they're supposedly acting like a glider with those little dinky wings. They're falling out of the sky, and somehow they come in for these perfect landings. But here's the big thing: is I studied that these so-called space shuttles. You hear the Doppler effect going when they fly by. You hear the Doppler. You hear the Doppler effect going by. They have engines, but what they do to try to disguise them, they have those two jets flying side by side. So you think, oh, you're hearing the jet engines. That's the disguise. So when you watch a space shuttle supposedly come back from space, like it's falling out of a rock out of the sky, and somehow as a glider coming in with those little tiny wings. When you watch the footage, they just show it the last moments. Like, oh, here it is. It's appearing, and it's in the sky.
They're always escorted, so that's why you hear the jets.
Exactly. And I have really good footage of. You can hear that. You can literally, and you can see. Obviously, these are not. I mean, you compare the flight of real gliders. I mean, it's dead silence to these so-called space shuttles, and you literally, they also have engines that are hidden as well in the back, and I showed the compartments where they're very, very intelligent, and obviously they have the engines for the initial launch, and they have the actual engines. And here's a big thing too: in Russia, they have the Buran, which means storm, and it's a clone of the space shuttle going at the same time. And we all seen the images and the video of these like 747s with these space shuttles aboard them, because again, they don't carry jet fuel only on the initial launch, so they need to be escorted. They need to be carried around, or by trailer. But the easiest way is by plane. They're not holding supposedly jet fuel. Here's the big problem: they did the same thing in Russia, where they show the Buran being hitched on the top of these airplanes, but they also let something out they shouldn't have let out. They showed the Buran, the space shuttle clones, taking off at on these tarmacs and flying. They're actually, because they never show that, obviously, because the space shuttle, they don't fly, they're just gliders, but they actually show the Buran flying from taking off like an airplane. Wow. That kind of blows away that they're just gliders and they only have fuel during the initial blast off into space. So again, I've covered many aspects, not just one. There's many aspects to the whole deception. I covered the whole Discover, the Challenger, so the whole spectrum. And the more you see, the more you know, and the more you dig, the more you find, of course. And so here's a problem: all the information I gathered over the years, you try to sum it up in a 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour conversation.
It's impossible.
It's impossible. It's like someone, you try to explain, for example, someone that went to a 4-year university try to educate them your whole entire 4 years of the ins and outs of everything you've done in a 3-hour conversation. How much they can grasp, how much they can see, how much they'll know from that. It's very, very limited. And also a big thing is a picture says 1,000 words. They haven't seen what we have seen with our own eyes. And I know that, Mikey, with you, you came to this conclusion on Flat Earth based on solid information. You're a teacher and educator, and I applaud you. You're in a position because you're in a position where myself, I'm behind the scenes, but you're putting you really put your neck out, and I really appreciate that, what you're doing, coming out as an educator, as a teacher, and doing what you're doing. And thank you for what you're doing. It's we need more people like you coming out and being brave enough to speak the truth when you see it.
It is risky, but I definitely want to get out of this field and move into something that isn't attached to any kind of
Dogma. Yeah.
Dogma. Yes. And it's very difficult to, because we really aren't allowed to teach anything outside of the STAR program or the SATs. So our curriculums are very guided. So if we're not teaching what the tests have, then we're out of compliance. So we're almost stuck.
Yeah.
So when we get into topics about teaching about the robber barons, and that's really the only time we can interject, like how everything is being manipulated and how our education is being manipulated by all the money, because all you have to do is go to the Rockefeller Foundation website. You can see how much money they give to the education system, how much money they put into the jab, like all these things that are being controlled right before our eyes. They don't hide it. Everything's in plain sight.
Absolutely. And the big trap is the further you're down a path of lies, it's very hard to turn around. If you're university educated, you spend X amount of dollars, and now someone throws a monkey around and says, hey, everything you've been fed is basically BS. All that money you spent, you're still in debt. You're spending money to be lied to, basically manipulated in
Right.
this system we're living in. So the people that usually tend to go in this direction are the ones that attended some college, like in my case, some college. But I knew the whole entire time I was going through high school, it's a system that's created. Even before that, you have the parents. They're at work, and while the parents at work, they got to have the kids being indoctrinated. I didn't know the word as a young person. I didn't know it wasn't part of my vocabulary, the word indoctrinated, but I knew it was a control system. I can see what was happening, and the peer pressure, and the rah school spirit, which I was never part of, and I didn't want to be part of it. And so I saw what was happening. And one thing I always do is I always sit back and I don't let my emotions dictate things. I sit back and I look at what's happening, and I look at where things are leading to, and without the agendas that going through the time, and definitely one thing I want to mention, actually talking about schools, is the graduation cap. I want to ask you, you know about the graduation cap, the story behind that?
I know it's symbolic, and it relates to the Freemasons because
Yes.
of the shape of the. I can't think of the name of it.
The mortar. It's the
mortar.
Yeah, the mortar when it comes to Freemasonry and the building blocks of building. And that's why Masons love to have photos like Michael Jackson, all these famous celebrities, behind the bricks of Freemasonry. They're the bricklayers of society. And basically what it comes down to is when you wear that cap, it's the actual mortar. And you don't have the higher ups. Like you look at Bill Cosby, you look at Oprah Winfrey, a lot of these famous people, when they're higher up, they do not wear the mortar board. They wear usually a standard baseball cap or a soft cap. When they're younger, they'll see some photos of some celebrities before they became enlightened wearing those mortar caps. But it's meant as an insult. It's meant as mockery, as you've been successfully indoctrinated in our lie system. And people think professors in universities are intelligent and well-read. Well, they're just, imagine the people that constructed that university and the ones that wrote those textbooks, that basically they're teaching out of verbatim. If you're not teaching verbatim, you're wrong. There's something wrong with you. You're not a top level professor because you're dictating from quote proven science, proven facts, information, and you're not top level. So to move up, you got to have the straight A's, and what you're doing is just regurgitating, or you're testing on lies, and you got the lies down right. You got an A+ on the lies on the globe or whatever else. But again, education's needed, mathematics, language, but again, a fine filter is required when it comes to science, when it comes to history. But yeah, it's just like church. There's exactly the same concept. 10 church with a good filter, because they're giving us some good information, but there's lies mixed in. So people just need discernment. And again, the problem is there's no universities for truthers. We're just, literally, when it comes down to it, it's about, I would say, 10, 12 years, myself doing it. There's a very, very relatively young real truth movement. There was one prior, but it was controlled. Guys like Bill Cooper, David Icke, Jordan Maxwell, all these types are giving us some truth. But then you have David Icke give us some truth. They don't talk about Planet Draconia and how they're lizard people running this world. When it's the twist of truth, when in reality, they are aliens per se, but not aliens from the world. They're alien to this world. They're the fallen ones and their bloodline. So they're just twisting the truth. There's no Planet Draconia, any of that nonsense. So it's truth in plain sight with a twist. And again, it's like this. The best analogy I have, and I showed this in a video, it's like a 10,000 piece puzzle, and you try to explain a lot of truth to people, but until you put at least 75% of that puzzle, they're not going to see it. So it's going to, even then they're going to just ignore and deny the information. So it's a long road. And over time, we have to, and I think this is the best way to put it. I really appreciate a supporter of my channel, Eddie Bravo. He's been on Joe Rogan's podcast many, many times. Of course, very good friends with Rogan. But he said this, as far as explaining the flat earth to people. He goes, I don't have patience, I don't have time to explain to people because it just causes fights, debates, arguments. The first thing I'll ask them is if they believe in the moon landing. If they believe in the moon landing, he says, I don't even start. They're too far gone.
Yeah.
It's too far to go. But you can still have a short, simple conversation and plant seeds with that individual. But as far as going in too far in depth, it's probably in futility. It's probably not going to go anywhere. But with myself, I kind of like never give up with certain individuals. When you already invested a lot of time trying to explain things to them, especially with family and close friends, you kind of maybe go far. Sometimes they don't want to hear it, but I look at it this way. There's nothing more important in this world than truth, really. And that leads to the Creator. That's why it's so important. Like the Bible says,
right?
The truth will set you free. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. So that's why it's so very important. And the Bible's literal as far as this whole world lie system, and that gets into the Antichrist system. It's kind of funny. It might be off topic, but it's very pertinent, very important. When it talks about in the Bible about how the Antichrist is basically through lying wonders is going to deceive the world. So lying wonders and false miracles. What is that? That's a hoax. That's a hoax, literally, when you translate it to simplest terms. So whatever's going to happen with this false miracle, the one-eyed, and that's why, of course, they do the one-eye symbolism with a lot of celebrities covering one eye. And some of them know what they're doing, some don't. You're supposed to cover the right eye because biblically, the Antichrist is blind in the right eye. And that's of course, with the one eye on the back of the dollar bill, that represents your one-eyed God. So that's what people don't understand, these symbols. And that gets back to Manly P. Hall, which I've talked about it pretty much every live stream. His famous quote, when the human race, mankind learns to read the language of symbolism, a great veil will fall from the eyes of men. And that gets back to that one-eyed God. And they put that one-eyed God in the pyramid, and the pyramid is again, the 60-degree angle. So read, like the old saying goes, read between the lines. It's all right in front of us, but you have to, not because we like it, but we have to study the occult, study the other side. Like a lot of Christians don't know this. There's a Revelation 9:11 in the Bible. Well, the Satanic Bible has the 9 rules, or is it 9 rules and the 11 laws in their Satanic Bible. So I find that very interesting. And of course, Revelation 9:11, that's the only verse in the Bible that mentions the Antichrist by name. His name is Apollyon in Greek and Abaddon in Hebrew. So, that's why Revelation 9:11 is so important in the Bible. That's why and people don't know this, that the whole calling system, the 9/11 calling system, was 1968. It was 33 years prior to that event. The same year, the first, the groundbreaking of the North Tower.
Oh, wow.
So
I think I've heard that before.
Yeah. So it was the very first phone call ever made in the 9/11 calling system was a city in Alabama called Haleysville, Alabama. It's funny, Haleysville with Haley's Comet, but Haleysville, it's on the 33rd parallel. I find that interesting as well. But the buildings came down literally with the North Tower after 33 years. And here's a big thing. The so-called pilot, I won't say his name, was 33 years. And these things are just plainly obvious to see. And I can go deeper and deeper. I got to be careful on this topic. I don't want to, go too deep on this topic, but there's so much to break down with this event, and I better stop there because I don't want I want this to stay going, and we're all good, and so we'll leave it there unless you want to go on that.
We'll save it for another discussion. But I think we need to cut this off and say our goodbyes because we're already at 3 hours and 5 minutes, and I think I'm going to have issues exporting this.
No, don't worry. And I'll tell you something too. Feel free, Mikey, to chop out whatever you want, use whatever you want, disregard, save some stuff for another episode, do whatever you want. It's going to be your presentation. And I'm so sorry. Sometimes I tend to go on for a long time. I end up going down, and I go down, and we're talking about one topic, and I veer off to another because everything's interconnected. It's interwoven, interweaved together, and literally, we could just go on and on forever. I could talk about, Dylan Roof, the 33, counts against him, more into Boston, more into Sandy, more into London, and just, all these events, of course, the OJ case. I'll just throw it at you real quick, and I'll let you go. They do it by the numbers. Mm-hmm. OJ, and you might have heard in the Alex Stein show, but he was sued by the Goldman family for $33 million. 13 years after being acquitted, he's sentenced to prison for 33 years for stealing back his own merchandise. All these things, these are the foundational things, but people are still stuck. They say, yeah, that's all by the numbers, and there's your dual 33s, but they can't believe, in the symbolic with a white Bronco. But people it's like flat Earth. You point something like that out, but it's there's too many stumbling blocks. But what about this? But what about that? But there's answers to them all, and it's a long road. And that's for another discussion of the time. And yeah, Mike, I won't go any longer. I'll just keep you tied up until next week talking. I tend to do that, and I apologize, but I'm very passionate about it, and I go on for a bit long, and that's just me.
Well, what website do you want to me to post up, and do you want me to put up the 153news.net, your channel on there? Or?
Yeah, you could do that. That'd be great. 153 News and the YouTube channel. I just got 30,000 subs. In the past I went by Russianvids, and everybody knew me by that. Mm-hmm. And I'd get 50,000 subs in like half a year. Now I'm RV Truth. People are still finding me because I never went by RV Truth. Well, I did I had RV Truth exposed in the Matrix for a short time, but what I'm getting at is still people they said, I thought you were gone, because people are not searching RV Truth. They're searching Russian
Right.
vids. Oh, there's, these phony, there's a lot of fake ones out there, a lot of ones stealing my name. And actually, real quick, there's someone out there with Russianvids.net posting my videos, and they have a donation button to collect.
Oh no, that's not you.
It's not me. No.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah, there's a lot of like that happening, and of course, people stealing my work. People take my work verbatim, and real quick, I did this video on Pink being a transgender, fake pregnancy, and literally some woman, every word verbatim, took everything I said. She took the visuals and she just used her voice, but took every word I said and just redid the video with her voice. Plagiarism at its finest.
Yeah, at least give you credit.
No credit given. Yeah, no credit given.
How hard is that?
Yeah, that's the thing is, and a lot of people, they'll take from me. I don't mind people taking my videos, re-upload without my permission. I already said that people could take my stuff. Be nice if you put a link, but people know it's my voice. But she tried to be tricky about it by not using my voice and just taking every word and just redoing the video with, and just basically, stealing from me. And I'll tell you right now, Alex Jones, Infowars did the same thing. I did a video on the Batman, a few years back, about 5-6 years ago. Mm-hmm. And they did a verbatim video, exact images, everything too. It wasn't, but the thing is, not every word was verbatim. They, used their own dialogue, their own words, but literally it was just a ripoff of my work. And I take that as flattery because, they're a big promotion, not a big promotion, but a big network. And my information is good enough where they can take it. So, yeah. And so nonetheless, thanks so much. I'll stop there because I'll keep yapping. Thanks so much, Mikey, for doing this. And man,
thank you for coming on this show. I mean, it's such an honor and a pleasure, and it was great meeting you finally. And I'll keep watching your stuff, and hopefully we'll do this again.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I mean, like I said, it's a long road, and you're well far ahead of the game just by hearing everything you're saying. You being an educator as well, it's really, I'm sure,
it's a long road.
What's
that? It's a long road.
A long road, and man, and you really, like I said during our talk, you really see who am I? I'm just a guy that nobody knows my identity, nobody knows besides my moniker. When a lot of people, like yourself, David Weiss, they put their real names out there. It can affect you. It can affect you. For example, people dox you. People put your real name out there. It's not so much when you're doing flat earth. When I'm calling events like shooting events, fake bombings, hoaxes, and then now people are doxing you. People get angry about those things, and it can lead to more problems. But this, of course, what we're talking about now is not going to be aired. But yeah, it's there's many variables with that. With flat earth, you're not going to get too many enemies. You're going to have people, of course, combative, but it's not going to be as bad as calling 9/11 out for what it is,
right.
A government operation, Sandy Hook, Boston, all these events, fake. You're going to create a lot of problems, and I've done that, and I've been shut down because I'll tell you real quick. Daily Mail, they reported me to YouTube for saying the London attack was a hoax. At the time, I had the 2 channels, 150,000 subs, and I was doing very well off topic. I had my Google AdSense. I was doing up to $900 a day with that too. I have to support myself, but I was making up to $900 a day because I was getting so many views on my videos. It was ridiculous. But what I'm getting at is, it's definitely a long road of truth, and you've been at truth I could tell for longer than a year and a half. But as far as flat earth, that's fantastic. You seem well versed for a year and a half. You're well from hearing you speak on it.
I was obsessed for about 3 months.
Yeah, and you're way ahead of the game.
The obsession never stopped. I mean, I was referencing everything, and because of my journalism experience, I was citing everything. So I wasn't just listening to people and taking their word for it. I was investigating and looking at it and, all right, where did this come from? And where did this come from? And so everything was just leading to something else.
Yeah,
And
yeah. And here's the thing is too, to be honest too, on the flip side, when people like myself, David Weiss, and others were doing Flat Earth, we didn't have any, we were the ones doing the new work and how does this work? What about, and there wasn't much information out there at all. So we
right.
had to do a lot of our own figuring out of things and brainstorming amongst the community. And but we knew foundationally we didn't have all the answers at the start, but we knew we're not living on a spinning ball. But we couldn't figure out certain things like eclipses in the beginning, tides, and these kind of things. We're like, we're like David Weiss. Well, what about this? We're like trying to figure it out. We don't know everything, but that's just being real. But now, it's still for a year and a half at this. Wow, I'm really happy. And again, that's what I was thinking before we spoke to you. I'm like, yeah, I'm definitely going to do this interview with you because, you're putting yourself out there. We need, and I said this before during my live streams, we need more people out there. If I stop making videos with David Weiss and there's not many others, it's going to die off. We need people that are passionate. Again, that's what I was thinking before we spoke to you. I'm like, yeah, I'm definitely going to do this interview with you because, you're putting yourself out there. We need, and I said this before during my live streams, we need more people out there. If I stop making videos with David Weiss and there's not many others, it's going to die off. We need people that are passionate about this very important truth because later on, this is going to be known. And I'm not doing this for glory, but doing it for the sake of truth that, wow, these people stuck their necks out and they were ridiculed in the beginning, but yeah, someone has to do it. Someone has to do it, and you got to have some courage, and you got to have a lot of passion, a lot of courage, and there'll be a lot of ridicule thrown your way. And again, consensus is the big thing. If you're doing a debate, I wouldn't even do it. If you start doing a lot of this, someone asks you to debate, say, there's no debate. The earth is flat.
I hate debates, honestly.
It's all they have is ridicule.
Yeah.
And they quote win with the ball to their side because of the bad stigma of flat earth and just ridicule. And it becomes a childish back and forth. You get dragged into that.
Yeah, because they just sit there, they just shake their head, and they focus on one position on one topic because that's their strategy. That's how they win these debates, is by not moving on to different subjects, because that's where they lose. If they keep moving on to different topics, they can't win those debates. So they just stick with one thing.
Yeah, and one thing I got really pissed off was with not Alex's fault, but Alex was being a gentleman. He was calling this one guy, we're going to be respectful. He's being really nice to the guy. And the guy turned around, just like 10 minutes later, called Alex an idiot, a moron. And after Alex was so very nice and gracious.
Because that's what they do.
Yeah. They're just scumbags. I don't want to say it, but they're hired help. They're scumbags. And they hate God. They hate the truth. And that's I'm even as a believer, I get a little bit fired up. And I say some certain things, but I'm kind of like this, man. Whatever I kind of say, right or wrong. But I'm imperfect, man, like everybody else. But I believe, one thing about me, I got that Russian blood, the temper. People ask, why is it Russianvids? Well, my dad's from Siberia. My mother, her parents are from Western Russia, so it's that Russian blood that boils, at times, and I can, and I kind of throw fire with fire. Professor Dave, I put that stack of poop on his head. I don't know if you saw that.
Yeah.
Watch that video, Professor Dave. I debunked the 24-hour midnight sun in Antarctica, and he's very pompous, arrogant,
I can't stand him.
Yeah. So what I did was I photoshopped this poop on his head there in the part of it, and you got to see it. But one part's funny because he has the band, the Beatles, on the back wall, like a picture hanging in the back. But it's funny because Paul McCartney has a song, how the fool on the hill sees the sun going down and his eyes sees the world spinning around. It's ironic.
It's a great song.
Yeah. And
it's the only song I like.
Yeah, and what's funny too is that one song, Strawberry Hills, Nothing is Real. Remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah, they put the truth in the lyrics. Nothing is real. And yeah. Or how about this? Is this just real life, or is this just fantasy? Caught in a
Oh, Queen.
landslide. Look up at the sky and see. There's other songs too.
Oh, there's a ton.
Yeah, there's a really good one. Welcome to the Grand Illusion. Don't believe the radio or the TV is just someone else's fantasy. And that one band, was it Nova Scotia, whatever, in Canada? Um, Life is just a fantasy. Do, do, do. Life is just a fantasy. And they're putting the truth. They're putting the Easter eggs right in front of us. The big one, of course, is with the other Canadian, Rush. I believe it's Canadian. Uh, um, all the world's indeed a stage. And they talk about being in the living in the limelight, and the fisheye lens, and that's exactly how they fake the. Here's one thing I should have mentioned is the during like documentaries on 9/11, they'll like show these construction workers going up spires, and they're using these fisheye lens. So it's like subconscious programming about the ball. But here's the funny thing is, as they show that footage on History Channel, the camera flexes back to being level, then concave, because it shows you the flex of the lens. So, but there's like it's in there, but a big part of it is the 9/11. They like to mix 9/11 and flat Earth, vaccines, flat Earth. Like how many times have I covered interviews with people like on CNN? This one woman, a world traveler, she said she got COVID, and she goes, in the sense of things, the world is flat, and going back to 2016, Dr. Agus on CBS News saying, how with Ebola here, and there'll be more viruses in the future because mosquitoes, and the world is flat. And he mentioned flat Earth like 3 times during that one. I'm sure you've seen these things, right?
I don't. That doesn't sound familiar.
Yeah, but like I said, yeah, I'm sure there's many things I mentioned during the show about, but it's good for the audience. A lot of it's but right. Just in case, there's always gonna be that new thing. Like there's people that send me stuff I've seen a million times, but then they send me this one good Easter egg. They'll send me like 10 emails, 9 things I've seen. But that one thing is, I'm glad they sent me emails, because that one thing is like, bam, I didn't know about that. I didn't see that before. That's a good thing to add to my repertoire, add to my my menu per se. But yeah, Dr. Agus said on CBS this morning, there'll be more viruses. So they're giving us 2 clues. That, quote, more viruses will spread. They're fake, but these viruses spread because the world is flat. So, but like I said, there's one lie, truth.
He said that?
Yeah, he said that because.
Wow.
But what I'm saying is, that's the duality. One lie, one truth. That's duality. So there's a duality concept within everything. Like I tell people all the time, people have to remember, this is the lie system, but the truth is in plain sight everywhere. They always give us hints. Like, here's something huge. There's many things I can mention. Bill Clinton's book called My Life, that was released, I think it was 2004, 2005. In his book, he talks about watching the moon landing on TV with his carpenter. And this is just mockery, of course, with his carpenter. And his carpenter says, those television fellas, they can fake things. And he said during in his book, he said, at the time I thought my carpenter was a crank, but during my time in the White House, I saw things on TV that made me see he was ahead, and he was ahead of the game. So literally, it's mockery. So he's saying things he saw on TV. What happened on his watch? The fake 1996 Atlanta bombing, the Oklahoma City bombing, which they blew up a building, but Timothy McVeigh, they supposedly executed at 33 years old, and it was a government building, easy to evacuate people. And I showed all the crisis actors there. So not to go on and on and on, but man, there's so much to cover. One last thing. All these cases from the fake 1996 bombing, I don't know if you saw my video on that, but I show a cop rubbing fake blood on a so-called victim on the ground, not a real bombing. What I'm getting at is, so how can they put this all together? Well, for all these fake events, Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, Jerry Lee Loughner in Arizona, Eric Rudolph in Atlanta, Tsarnaev in Boston, all have the same lawyer in Judy Clark. So this is how, as people just say, well, how, I have answers. What I'm getting, I have answers to these questions. People ask. Like, I'll tell people about, about space.com saying how the moon is supposedly in Earth's atmosphere. And I told people this before that the moon is within Earth's atmosphere. Oh, no, it's not the deep space. And so people will, like, I'll tell people on the street, I'll tell my neighbor about it. Then he'll try to, like, confront me, like, he'll catch me, like, well, who owns space.com? Like, I'm not going to know, because it's Lou Dobbs. Because Lou Dobbs, Lou Dobbs. So they think they're going to catch me, like, oh, I'm just like somebody spouting something, a little bit of information. No, I look in deeper. Who owns it? What's the foundation? Just like TMZ, it's owned by Time Warner. Here's something funny about the OJ case. The OJ case, I told you about the years. He wrote a book supposedly while in jail. It was called If I Did It or whatever. I forgot the name of the audio book, but whatever the case is, it was released by Time Warner. Is this a contradictory? Not a contradictory. Well, yeah, it's a contradictory because they're the ones that are covering this so-called news story. They're also the ones promoting or publishing his audiobook. A conflict of interest. A conflict of interest was the word I was looking for. And the Court TV, also owned by Time Warner. TMZ, owned by Time Warner. True TV, owned by Time Warner with Jesse Ventura. And it's funny because Jesse Ventura is part of the pro wrestling angle, where he was an actor to a pro wrestler to this guy on TV, supposedly a truth speaker. So and what I'm getting at is he was a wrestler that worked for a pro wrestling organization owned by Time Warner in WCW. They own CNN. So the connections are all there. Alex Jones admitted that his worker, Alex Jones' employee admitted to his worker that he works for Time Warner. You see that video from years ago? I'll make it quick. Basically, Mike Hansen, a longtime employee of Alex Jones, was in Austin, Texas. I know you're in Texas yourself.
Yeah.
He was filming these big rig trucks being pulled over by police. And these police were like, you can't be filming. I'm like, no, the Constitution allows us to be filming in public and this, and this. And the cop says, I'm just here to do my job. I was told to tell you to leave. The cop asked for his ID. The guy said, I don't have to show you, but I will. And he flashed his wallet. And the cop read, and this is obviously not like something staged. This is a cop pulling up and there's traffic, all this stuff. He goes, you work for Time, and he was interrupted. Basically, we was reading off, you work for Time Warner. He goes, I work for InfoWars. And the cop said again, it says Time, he's trying to say Time Warner again. Every time he tried to say Time Warner, Mike Hansen kept saying Infowars.com. But basically stating Time Warner, InfoWars were on the same ID. Same, a pass on
controlled opposition.
Controlled op. So that's what I'm getting at with that. And that's a huge, huge one. So Alex Jones, a character, he's 33 in numerology. InfoWars is 33. And he's appeared on CNN. That's the connection. CNN's owned by Time Warner. So when you see Piers Morgan versus Alex Jones debating, it's a Time Warner operation. It's like Hulk Hogan versus Roddy Piper.
They're all actors.
They're all actors.
All of them.
Yeah, 100%. Even during a lawsuit with Alex Jones, with his wife, the document showed that the defense by the lawyer for Alex Jones was he's just a character on TV. That's not really him, because she tried to show, look how insane he is, how mentally unstable he is. And the lawyer's defense was he's literally just an actor.
Yep.
So yeah, it goes through. Anyways, Mikey, I appreciate it again. It's been they're gonna think we're Freemasons because we've been going on for 3 hours and 30 minutes.
Yeah.
Just about. Yeah, just about. Yeah. So it's good talking to you, man. And
unless
you want to mention something else.
Yeah.
Yeah, unless you want to mention anything else, I don't want to keep it any longer. If you got to get going.
Oh no, I think you've covered more than what I was going to talk to you about.
Yeah, and any of these things we're talking about after the fact, you can always chop them in. I don't know if it's going to be usable. Probably not, because it's not, maybe conducive to being part of, like, trying to chop it in or crop it in, put it all together. But yeah, sometimes it's best to start from the start and then chop out anything you don't want in there, and then the ending's the ending, and everything else is just kind of like, just two guys talking about other stuff. And there's a lot more to discuss, man. Feel free to get in contact with me in the future if you want to do, in months or a year, whatever, or even sooner, whatever you want to do. Definitely. Feel free to get a hold of me, just chop it up, whatever.
All right. Same here. You can contact me anytime.
All right, Mikey. Sounds good, man. And definitely let me know when you're about to air this. What I'm going to do is I'm going to share a link on my channel to yours. And I'm going to tell people to subscribe to you and get aboard your channel and share your work as well.
All right. I appreciate it.
No worries, brother.
Enjoy the rest of your evening.
You too. Take care.
Yeah.
You talk to 100 men. What would you do if your beautiful date told you the earth was flat?
I hope he'd agree with me.
Agree with her.
You know I had to tell him. Yeah. The earth is flat. Bro, you need to check your facts. I got high up through the roof, and I landed on the moon. The moon flat too. In reality, everything is just in 2D, like a video game from 1983. I'm side scrolling up and down the street while y'all sleep. Call me B.O.B. cause I don't see the curve. Messing up my vibe, yeah, you got a lot of nerve. Read a book, nah, I don't wanna learn. Read a book, nah, I don't wanna learn. They say that we are king. For me and my homies, we don't say it, we just spray it. I'ma leave it, namaste. Do your research, how much I gotta say it. The earth is flat. Bro, you need to check your facts. I got high up through the roof, and I landed on the moon. The moon flat too. In reality, everything is just in 2D, like a video game from 1983. I'm side scrolling up and down the street while y'all sleep. Y'all sleep. Y'all sleep.